In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2024, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton DeShane.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
See these eyes so green, I can stare for 1,000 years, colder than the moon. It's been so long. Feel my blood and rage. It's just the fear of losing you. Don't you know my name? Well, you've been so long. And I've been putting out fire with gasoline.
Hello and welcome to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe?
My voice cracked there at the end.
Do you want it to go again?
No. We're doing it live.
I am your non-feline host.
And I am
Dylan Roth.
I am your owns two felines host, Dalton DeShane.
And you are listening to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, the podcast where we attempt to resurrect Universal Studios' failed cinematic universe of monster movies one pitch at a time. This is really an interesting episode that we find ourselves in. You can tell we've already started with something a little bit different.
David Bowie crossover.
Yes. If you haven't guessed already, we are doing a new version of the 1942 RKO film that was later remade by Universal and writer-director Paul Schrader in 1982, Cat People.
Yes.
I, once again, kind of fudged the rules a little bit when we were drafting movies.
I think it's owned by Universal.
I mean, I think so. No one's really keeping close tabs on the rights to Cat People.
The most recent version was by
Universal. Right.
And I also know that in the 50s, a lot of films owned by Paramount and RKO, I believe, were sold to Universal for television rights. I don't know that Cat People was one of them, but it would make sense if then Universal remade it, that they would have maybe bought the rights from RKO. And RKO doesn't
They don't exist anymore. Most of their catalog was originally purchased by Paramount, but you're right.
It might have gotten sold to Universal then.
It could have. Anyway, we are the show where we challenge each other back and forth, creating the next chapter of shared universe that doesn't exist.
Yep.
I'm taking extra care to set up the premise of the show this week because for the first time in a while, I think we can maybe advertise this to people who have not listened from the beginning.
And that gives us a little hint of the direction you may be going with this. But yeah, Cat People is our only non-franchise movie of Phase 3 until Dark Legion 3. But everything we have is a sequel to a film we've already pitched, except for Cat People, which also you told me before we started recording, and I hope this isn't telling tales out of school, but that this does not feature any of our normal Dark Legion characters, which is the first time that you have had a completely whole cloth original pitch since your very first pitch on this show, The Wolfman, which still used Dr. Jekyll, but Jekyll wasn't like the base of the...
And the basic premise of The Wolfman with like the names of the classic characters.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying like from our modern universe. Like you had to take an existing property and whole cloth come up with a new remake, while Jekyll was based on the Jekyll from The Mummy.
Right.
And then you had a sequel to The Wolfman. You had Phantom of the Phantom, which took our existing characters, Jenny and Carol, and Jack. Then you had Dracula Lives, which is our version of Dracula that we established in House of Dracula.
Right.
Then you had The Mummy, and then you had
and our Hunchback was
which
also a Frankenstein movie. Yeah.
So this is the first time you've had to like start from scratch since our very first episode that you did.
And it was pretty exciting to do. The thing is that I had an idea of what I wanted to do with Cat People from the moment I watched the 1942 Cat People.
And you had kind of an idea when you added it to the slate, right?
Right.
You were the one that picked this.
So yeah, I had watched the 42
slate.
Cat People last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember why exactly. I was just watching a lot of horror movies at the time, doing this podcast with you. I was in a particular mode. And I watched this and like, oh, I want to put this in the slate. I have an idea. I want to do this one for the show. And that idea basically, like, there were like a lot of details that shifted, but it's cool the way that I was not at all sure how I was going to make it Dark Universe related when I made my decision and when I came up with my basic log line for this movie.
Yeah.
Granted, sometimes we start these, I have no idea what the log line of the film is, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting the way that I actually lucked into some stuff that would allow me to address some of the traits of our universe from an angle that I kept having to cut out of other drafts.
Yeah.
And so this, I think, still should appeal to the Dark Listener lore fans, people who are really interested. The Dark Listener. To the Dark Legion fans who are really interested in the lore of our universe.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this with no plan for any characters from this. Like with your Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
I wrote this with no plans for any part of it to tie into future movies.
Mm-hmm.
But did I stick to that? We'll see.
Yeah,
with Black Lagoon, only your post-credits scene.
My post-credits involved Indrid Cold, but I did make sure that while I didn't start from this place with Black Lagoon, I did make sure that by the time I was done, I knew how we could integrate it into the universe going forward. But that was because I felt there was a pressure for a creature from the Black Lagoon to be a part of the Dark Legion stories.
One of the, like, premier, most identifiable Universal monsters.
But
I don't have that here. No one's like, how can you do a Dark Universe without cat people?
Yeah, like it could be that we never see any of these characters again, depending on what you do. But then one of the things I might be looking for as we go through this is what differentiates this between a guest pitch. Like what makes
a lot of
this...
dialogue, primarily.
Well, yeah.
just like an absolute fuck ton of dialogue.
But what is it about this pitch that makes it necessary to be part of our phase 3, even if our characters don't appear or these characters don't recur? And we'll
you
find
might
out.
find that it doesn't. I was telling you before we went on the air, I wrote this very, very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like about the same amount of time as it took for me to write the final draft of Hunchback. And that went through a lot of revisions. So that really, I spent more time on.
Yeah.
We were recording this a week before we usually do. I was on a slightly faster timeline, and it ended up...
Although you had an extra week because of Hunchback Part 2.
That's true. But I also, I did kind of put myself into a bind because this is also the month where I launched Future Endeavors, my WWE YouTube series thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up with a lot of extra baby time just because the scheduling with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
A big chunk of this movie was written during a blessed 3-hour nap from my baby son over the weekend.
Which is funny because as soon as we finish Hunchback, you told me, I'm going to go start Cat People right now. I'm going to get ahead of this.
I meant to. I actually did write a bunch of the beginning of the movie,
yeah.
And then I stalled out. I ended up with a bunch of paying gigs, which is nice. But this is rougher than, like Dracula Lives.
It's going to be more of a pitch.
Yes.
As parts of Love Never Dies were. The idea here, again, for new listeners, we don't necessarily write full movies. We call them scriptments because they're sort of half screenplay, half pitch, half treatment.
Yeah. Credit to James Cameron for coining the term, I think.
Yes. And we have been building a cinematic universe similar to the Marvel universe based entirely on the 2017 Mummy film that Universal released with Tom Cruise.
And we've taken those characters in some really wild directions.
I don't remember how many movies we have at this point, but probably
this,
like
I think,
15-ish?
will be, I think, 18 or 19.
Okay. So we've made basically a whole cinematic universe. There's a lot of lore. We, of course, encourage you to go back and listen to what we've done so far. Our last episode was a musical episode.
Yes.
Our second musical episode.
Yeah, not our first musical episode.
But this one is going to be, it sounds like pretty standalone. But knowing that, let's go into the predictions from the fans.
This will be exciting because I was so heads down with this. I have not seen any of these.
Obviously, I couldn't take all of them. As you all know, your suggestions and expectations were all great. But I just had to pick a few because because we have been going long, as
Yes.
Our listeners know.
We sure have.
So let's get into these. First of all, Lexi Paisley on Blue Sky wants long, grotesque transformation scenes, which I thought I would include because I know you had some regret about our werewolf movies that you wrote not having more sort of detailed transformations. And so maybe this will be your opportunity to make the cats really gnarly when they transform. I don't know. Yeah, I guess as another thing we should mention for those, we don't have to do a whole recap of the two Cat People movies, but the basic premise of both of them is they involve people who maybe when they kiss or have sex or are in some elevated emotional states turn into panthers. In the first one in 1942 is just a woman who, if she kisses a man, will turn into a panther and kill him. In the Paul Schrader one, it's sort of if these people, man or women, have sex with someone, they will turn into a panther until they kill somebody, and then they turn back human. So that's kind of just the basic premise of those films. We had a lot of people predicting how this would connect to other Dark Universe properties.
Okay.
Which again, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Estive on Twitter and Saf on Discord both think that this will have some kind of connection to Merritt's Black Cat pitch, which we had in Phase 2, and make that episode fully canon. Dick Genital on Twitter
I love our fans.
thinks Gabby Utterson might be the main character as a PI with a background in the supernatural.
That would have been, honestly, this would have been a great time to feature Gabby.
Yeah.
I did not. I like the suggestion. It didn't end up being this kind of story that she would, didn't end up being a story for her, but looking back, I can definitely think I like that suggestion.
I like that suggestion too, but I also like the idea of you doing an episode where you're not using one of your previous characters as a crutch.
Yes.
Not that it would necessarily be a crutch.
No,
but
it does immediately add interest to our existing viewers to have somebody there. If I were trying to market this, it's probably like I would, like in Part of News, I probably would feel pressure to include a character. And if I was going to include one, Gabby is a great pick.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't change the stakes of the movie by being there.
And that would kind of make this a stealth Jekyll and Hyde sequel, much like Hunchback was a stealth Frankenstein sequel.
Yeah.
Gabby Utterson was a character you created for your Jekyll and Hyde film.
Right. She's a private detective now.
Reappeared in Phantom of the Opera, which you also wrote. Great Nine Rejects on Instagram thinks the Cat People will be some form of historical rival to werewolves. They also added that someone will yell, putting out fire with gasoline before burning someone alive. And Rouge Goat on our Discord also expected some sort of tie to the werewolves, because since we are a cinematic universe, we have people that turn into wolves. Now maybe we have people that turn into panthers. Who knows if they're connected? Related to that, Sylvie the Cephalopod on Discord thinks we might see the Bloodhounds from your Werewolves of London pitch. And Violet on Discord predicts a Carmilla cameo. Of course, Carmilla was just introduced by me in Love Never Dies a few weeks ago, but that does give you time to add her in if you wanted to. Because in the original Carmilla novel, Carmilla turns into a panther. She has the power to transform into a panther. So it would make her appropriate for Cat People. A lot of people think this will be horny.
They are right.
Okay, there we go.
That's one thing I will spoil up front. This is up there as potentially my horniest.
You have written our horniest entries.
Yes. I will also say that there is some stuff here that was really uncomfortable to write and will likely be uncomfortable to hear. In terms of sexual content.
Am I going to have to cancel your ass?
I don't think so. I'm just forewarning that there will be stuff that is hot and there will be stuff that is not hot. And they are going to be framed appropriately.
Okay.
I will say that I don't think that there's not a lot of like sexual violence involved. I don't want to, so if you're like, and I will try to forewarn folks when it's about to get like maybe difficult.
Well, this makes sense because Roxanne on Discord did say nothing about this movie will be sexy, but it will be very horny. And Frankie on Discord concurred, saying it will be horny, but not thirsty. So we will see if that pans out. A lot of people think that furries will be involved. Delenial on Instagram, Pagan Potaster on Instagram, Ian D and Morg in the Discord both predicted, or all four of them predicted some kind of furry involvement, even if it's just a joke. Not that we think our furry fans are a joke. We love you, furries. We know you're out there. Shout out to the furries. Samantha, the demon cat, thinks the protagonist will be a trans femme for whom becoming a cat person is gender as hell, which is a great prediction. Although, knowing you, I don't think you would be comfortable writing a trans character where the trans identity was a key part of the story.
And so I guess I'll talk about this here. I warned people, I think, on the air earlier that while this is, while you are serving our lesbian listeners very deliberately,
yes,
my stuff this season is pretty straight. I don't think that should be too shocking. I am the token straight host and listener of the show. And some of that is because I'm dabbling in some complicated gender stuff, and I felt like the more I considered queering it up, the more it muddled what I was trying to say and potentially ended up making the messages worse.
Yeah.
People are welcome to, because these castings are pretty open to it, are welcome to decide, I think that X or Y character should actually be trans, blah, 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 throw that casting in there. But for the sake of my writing it, I'm not going to be explicit about any of it, because I don't want anything in this script to be misinterpreted as a commentary on gender identity beyond
something you weren't prepared to comment on.
I talk a little bit. I mean, there's a lot to do with gender dynamics and a lot to do with gender performance and gender programming, I think. But I kept it very. I mean, for better or worse, it's fairly binary in this, and I think that is just because I don't feel qualified trying to complicate it further. Okay. I think that's for someone else to do. I think that will likely be a fair criticism of some stuff I have going on here. Also, I wrote this really fast. I don't know that I'm going to agree with the things that I have to say with this by the time we're reading.
Sounds like we're going to have a spicy one today.
Well, that's the other thing that I want to say is when you did Black Lagoon, and I've been thinking about this a lot as you've been writing, when you wrote Black Lagoon, you said, I don't have all the answers to the questions that I bring up here. And that is often how you distinguish art from entertainment.
Sure.
I do not have answers to all of the questions that I bring up in here. I don't know that there might be someone who's just like, no, what needs to happen is blah, 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 blah. But I have deliberately tried to make problems that are not easily solved by, why don't they just X or Y?
Yeah. The tough part with that, I think, especially when you don't have time to revise, is that not the first time through, you don't always even pose the questions that you meant to pose, you know, or pose them in the way you meant to pose them. And sometimes you can end up insinuating or asking things that maybe you didn't even realize you were or wouldn't until another pass or until someone else hears it.
There's some stuff here where I end up in the third act where I'm like, I don't know that I would do this if I were doing it again. Because I think mostly, like, I'm grateful that I get to defend and explain and clarify my work on the show.
Yes.
Because there's definitely some stuff where I feel like it could. Well, I don't want to let people decide.
Yeah.
I'll let you decide first, and then hopefully say, I think it's good, Dylan. And then that will encourage other people to say, I think it's good.
And I might not catch them as we read through because I'm always thinking about so many things, whether it's us recording, I'm reading lines, I'm, thinking about the structure of the episode. So maybe I will miss some thematic things on the first time through as well. Maybe this is something we can revisit on a future episode and talk about how we feel about it in retrospect. I'm sure our fans will have thoughts, and I'm sure we'll get theories and explications and things in the Discord.
Right. But anyway, I'm already reaching a little bit with this thing about commenting on womanhood, a thing that I have not experienced. And so I don't want to reach any further beyond that into a territory that, as much as I may try to educate myself and as immersed as I have completely accidentally become in the culture, I don't have the authority to really paint that picture.
I mean, this was an interesting pick because Cat People is famous for being one of the sort of more nuanced classic horror films. With a lot going on.
Yeah, I love the 42 Cat People.
It's great. There's a lot of feminist subtext. There's queer subtext. There's patriarchal subtext. There's a lot of things you can read from it. I know we had a lot of people that were hoping for something queerer, but of course you are going to write this from your own perspective.
Right, and I often think that that's in the eye of the beholder as well. I think that people will find readings in here that maybe I didn't mean to put in there, or maybe are subconsciously in there, because we're all intaking and outputting all these various things in our lives. So I'll be interested in seeing how people project or extract their own experiences from this.
Well, on that very serious note, let's do some of the jokier predictions, and then we'll
Okay.
get into the pitch.
Bring it on.
A lot of people were bringing up that this would have some sort of crossover with the 2019 Cats film, that there might be an appearance from Taylor Swift. She might do an original song for it. That your movie would just be the butthole cut of Cats before they digitally removed the CGI
I ran out of
buttholes.
time. I just copy and pasted the script from Cats and sent it to you.
I will assume that whatever cats are in your film do have visible buttholes, and I think we can all just picture that.
We certainly didn't edit any of them out in post.
People thought there might be ties to Josie and the Pussycats, which would be a very Dylan thing to do.
I do love that film.
And a lot of people were joking about cat behaviors that our cat people might exhibit. Andy from the Discord says a character will ask to be let outside and then immediately want to come back in again. Sylvie the Cephalopod said glasses will be knocked off counters. Nightmare Matt said there will be a lot of tastefully strewn about yarn in our settings. So it sounds like maybe that's not the tone you were going for.
Well,
but who knows?
The thing is, the tone of this is wobbly to me. It's one of the things that I think would have to get fixed in there, because I have a lot of jokes and a lot of comedy in this as well.
That's good.
Yeah, it made it sound like it was all going to be like really, really heavy. I would say this is it's a horror comedy kind of. I don't know, and I think that this will maybe it certainly will factor into my choice of director, which we'll get to right before we get to.
Let's talk about it right now, because that's it for our predictions. Let's talk about your choice of director, and then get into the pitch.
Okay, so this is tricky because the obvious choice to direct this movie is Karen Kusama, but she kind of already made this movie.
Who's Karen Kusama?
The director of Jennifer's Body.
Ah, okay.
But that's sort of the tone in parts that I'm going for. But it's so... I don't want to ask her to repeat herself because she's capable of a lot of other stuff. So the name that I ended up coming up with for the director, not necessarily like last time we had to do a bunch of preambles, as you know that like Tim Burton is not on the upswing these days.
Sure.
I kind of like Olivia Wilde for this.
Interesting.
Not because of Don't Worry, Darling, a movie that I think is pretty uneven, but that I think is good looking. I think the script is the weak point of that movie. But because of Booksmart, which I think is a really funny teen sex comedy.
Okay.
I think this is a project also that would like interest her as like a producer. I think she's got a really good eye. The big thing with me is that she shoots like my favorite parties right now in cinema. I love how she shoots a party. It happens in both of her features. So in my head, that's kind of the direction that I'm going. But Karen Kusama asterisk as well.
Okay. That being said, do we want to get into the pitch?
Let's do it. Oh, one final note, and I think this will probably should affect the way that people's expectations go for this story. I am not calling my pitch Cat People.
Yes, I am seeing that on the script in front of me right now.
I actually found a title that I liked a lot better for this movie.
Okay.
This is still based on Cat People, written by DeWitt Bodine, but submitted for the approval of the Universal Studios Board of Directors. This is Dylan Roth's Kill Your Darlings. Cold open. A full moon hangs over a rural road in a quiet town in the Appalachian Mountains. It's the sort of place where you can hear the crickets chirp, where you can see the stars, and where houses are sometimes miles apart. It's the sort of place where a man can run naked, screaming down a road at night without anyone noticing. Like this guy here. A tall, fit man in his 30s sprints naked and barefoot on the cracked asphalt, an open field to one side of him and a dense forest to the other. Between his heavy, panicked breaths, he cries out for help, but there's no one within earshot. There's a four-way intersection ahead, between two roads that each seem to go on forever. He waves his arms at the crossroads, hoping anyone might see him. No such luck. Now we take the point of view of a predator, low to the ground, hurtling down the road towards the naked man. We can hear it snarling and growling. The man turns and sees it coming. He screams and runs into the woods. We follow him as he scrambles through the darkness, scraping his ankles against branches and barbs until he bumps into a thick, tall tree. He starts climbing, scraping the bark with his knees, splinters puncturing his hands and feet. When he reaches a high, sturdy branch, he stops and takes a long look around at the surrounding woods. It's hard to see. The foliage is thick, and very little of the moonlight cuts through. Still, seeing and hearing nothing, His breathing starts to slow. He's made it. Cut to a view from a branch above him, looking down at the man. The predator could pounce on him at any time, but it waits until he turns around and sees it. He screams, and we dive straight at him. Cut to black. Title: Kill Your Darlings. Act 1. Act 1 opens in a classroom where a dozen college students sit around a long wooden table. Each of them has a printed copy of the same short story in front of them, each individually marked up in ballpoint pen. At the end of the table, a tall, slender guy sits reading aloud from his manuscript. This is Lewis, played by Dominic Sessa of The Holdovers. He performs his excerpt with total confidence.
Chris sits up on the edge of the bed and starts scanning the floor for his boxers. Pepper places a hand on his back. "Wouldn't you rather stick around a while?" she asks playfully. "I think there are still a few muscle groups we haven't tired out." "On you, maybe," Chris laughs. "I'll be lucky if my legs last the walk home." "Well then, why don't you lie back down?" says Pepper. "Take a load off, so to speak."
One of Lewis's female classmates rolls her eyes. Another giggles.
From behind, Pepper crosses her arms over Chris's chest and pulls him back into bed. She rolls on top of him and leans forward to tongue his earlobe. He feels her nipples firm up against his chest. Chris sighs. Another late night at the office.
Lewis sets his draft on the table in front of him and sits back with a proud grin on his face. On the opposite end of the table sits the class instructor, Professor Joe McManus, played by New Girl's Lamorne Morris. Joe clears his throat to break the awkward silence. So, who wants to kick off the discussion? Remember to be honest but respectful. Just because the author isn't allowed to speak during their workshop doesn't mean we should pretend they're not in the room. We're here to be constructive. A student speaks.
Can we talk about the dialogue? "Buck up, bromigo. I got some news that's going to put the pink back in your lemonade." Like, no offense, but nobody in real life talks like this.
Across the table, a student laughs. Ha! This is Alice, actor TBD. I'm sorry, I didn't find someone for this.
Okay.
A sophomore wearing the apparel of the school swim team. Lewis does talk like that. That's the problem. From his end of the table, Lewis chuckles and shakes his head to himself, dead to rights. Another student speaks up.
That doesn't matter. The reader isn't going to have someone sitting over their shoulder when they read this to say, "Hey, I know this sounds hokey, but trust me, I met a guy who was really like this."
Dr. Joe agrees. That's a fair point. This is what we mean when we talk about realism versus believability. Even if we're writing from personal experience, there's no guarantee that it'll be accepted by the reader. Kenzie, a femme student with an emo pop-punk revival aesthetic, sits with her arms crossed and a scowl on her face. Kenzie, you look like you've got something to say.
I don't like that we had to sit through Lewis reading his sexual fantasy aloud.
A sweaty student in an ill-fitting shirt replies, "That's how it works. He gets to read an excerpt before the workshop."
And he could have picked any page to read aloud to the class. He didn't have to start at the top. Very off-putting to start a story in the middle of a sex scene, by the way.
Another student speaks up. "But the story is about sex. We say that in short fiction, every scene needs to represent the entire story. It's totally apropos."
Totally apropos. We should absolutely be the arbiters of how normal people talk.
Lewis, no talking during your workshop.
I'm just saying, name another academic scenario in which students are forcibly subjected to explicit sexual material.
There were murmurs from all around the table. Dr. Joe reels the class back in. "We're here to study fiction, and fiction often takes us to uncomfortable places."
But do we really need the line about the stiffening nipples?
The nipples are the most important part. It's a sensory detail that puts us in the scene. And it lets us share in Pepper's sexual pleasure even though we're attached to Steve's point of view. That's what makes it sexy.
You think this is sexy?
Yeah, I do. Lewis pumps his fist and quietly exclaims, "Yes," to himself. Dr. Joe once again steps in. "All right, let's take a step back. We can't spend the whole hour debating the first 6 paragraphs of a 40-page story. We've got a lot of emphasis on sex here. What is the author trying to say about sex?" "It's a tragedy." Eyes turn toward the student who hasn't spoken yet. This is Oliver, a student who's the same age as the rest but reads younger. His clothes fit poorly on his scrawny body, and he hasn't gotten out of his high school acne. He's played by Donald Elise Watkins, a young actor I picked because I really liked him as the lead of the indie college comedy Emergency, and by total coincidence, he just played a small role in the movie Cat Person. We follow Steve through a week of his life, at work, with friends, and he never seems engaged. Nothing reaches him. He's got no interests beyond sex, and no one has any interest in him beyond sex. Even with his guy friends, there's no warmth there. They're just indulging this, pack hunting behavior. The whole conflict of the story comes from Dana trying to get to know him and his being afraid that if she takes a closer look, she won't find anything. And then I'll have to admit how empty he is inside. Dr. Joe nods. "Okay, that's somewhere to start. Let's dig into the text." Lewis smirks, and he and Oliver share a nod. Cut to the students filing into the hallway after class. Lewis and Oliver walk side by side.
Dang, Oliver, you really lit me up in there.
What? I lit up your character, bro. I gave you, the author, a pretty good rub.
Whoa, Ollie, let's leave the dirty talk at home. You're going to make Kenzie blush.
Kenzie made some valid points.
If Kenzie had thought my story was written by a woman, she would have said it was a brave critique of male sexual entitlement or something.
Well, is it?
Is it what?
Is it really a self-critique, or did I give you too much credit back there?
I prefer to let my work speak for itself.
Alice joins them. Of course you do. It sounds smarter that way.
I'm a man of letters. Thanks for sticking up for me in the workshop.
Somebody's got to speak for your target demographic.
You coming over tonight?
Nope, got a date. I'm free Thursday.
Dope. Meet me at 9.
Alice gives Lewis a kiss on the cheek and heads off in her own direction. Lewis turns to Oliver.
Ollie, can you find somewhere to be on Thursday night?
Until how late?
We usually downshift to snuggle mode by like 11:30.
You know, when I agreed to be your roommate, I didn't expect to spend my sophomore year in a state of permanent sexile.
A sexodus, if you will.
Clever.
Perpetually. You know, there's a simple solution to this dilemma. This whole game of musical dormitories works better if everyone plays. You just gotta put yourself out there.
Oliver puts out his scrawny arms. Here I am. Let the honeys queue up.
You see, if you actually meant that, like actually put forth an effort, they actually might. Look around, homie. What does everyone around here have in common?
Oliver scans the hallway full of students, all carrying books and laptop bags. You've slept with all of them? Lewis flicks Oliver hard in the earlobe, then points to the cover of a book being carried by a passing student. The cover reads, The Dark Legion, the true story of Earth's mightiest monsters by Cassandra Falk.
They're all freaked out, man. First, we lose half our high school years to a deadly pandemic. Then, the next thing you know, demons are real. A guy was found torn to shreds in the woods the other night, and the police suspect that a werewolf is responsible. The police said that. The apocalypse is nigh. There's a hell below, and we're all gonna go. People are fucking like the ship's on fire, and you know what? It is. So what are you waiting for?
Oliver has no response, and the two of them walk out of frame. We now meet Irina, played by Priscilla actor Kaylee Spaney.
The woman who played Priscilla?
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is the first actor who I know who it is.
Okay. A woman of 19 or 20 with a conservative, preppy style of dress. If this school had a uniform, this is what it would look like. She's walking down the hall of an all-female dorm in the middle of the afternoon, holding a thick envelope that she picked up from the student mail center. She arrives at a door and fiddles loudly with her keys. We hear some commotion from the other side. Ah, fuck! Irina opens the door to find her roommate, Josie, naked in bed under a male student, Devin. Josie scrambles to pull the covers over both of their bodies. Irina cries out and closes the door.
Sorry!
Jesus, Irina, can you come back in like a half hour?
I need my laptop. Sorry.
Just a minute. A minute later, Josie gingerly opens the door wearing a pair of sweats. Her hair is a massive brown cloud around her head. Devin, a square jaw who definitely works out, sits on a bed in boxers and a tight top, looking proud of himself. Irina steps inside and gives Josie's guy an awkward little wave. He nods as if to say, "What's up, girl?" She blushes and breaks eye contact, only for her gaze to fall on the garbage can, where 2 open condom wrappers are plainly visible. She grabs her laptop from her desk while Josie waits impatiently, holding the door. No more words are exchanged. The door hits Irina in the butt on her way out. She leans back against it, closes her eyes, and breathes deep, meditative breaths. Later, in the early evening, we see Irina walking across the university's small cloistered campus. Every building in sight is either dorms, classrooms, or administration, all situated along a narrow private road on the perimeter of a neat grassy common area about the size of a football field. It's a university, but it could easily be mistaken for one of those huge California high schools you see in 90s movies. Irina's phone buzzes. She checks it and sees a text from Josie. It reads, "What time are you coming home tonight?" Irina texts back, "No plans." Josie replies, "Can you give me a ballpark?" Frustrated, Irina types the response, "No," but doesn't send it. She stares at the blinking cursor for a few seconds, then deletes what she's written. Instead, she sends 7. Josie replies with an abbreviated thanks and a kissy heart face emoji. Irina sighs and walks lifelessly across the quad towards the large student center at the end of campus. On the other side of the lawn, Oliver and Lewis are headed in the same direction. That is, until Lewis gestures that he'll be pairing off. Aren't you eating?
Actually, I'm going to head over to Chelsea's. So yes.
Chelsea, you just invited Alice over.
Yeah, and she couldn't make it because she had a date with someone else. And now I have a date with someone else.
And you made these plans just now?
That's right.
What, so you've been texting a girl this whole time you've been talking to me?
Oliver, buddy, sweetie, pumpkin. Every time you have seen me, during every single conversation you and I have ever had, I have been texting a girl. It is the main thing that I do. Try it sometime.
Lewis gives Oliver a little wave and wanders off down another path. Oliver continues alone towards the student center. Inside, Oliver joins a few hundred other teens and 20-somethings in the main dining hall. This is the sort of cliquey campus where groups of students ossify into little family units who eat 2 or 3 meals together every day. It's awkward to sit alone in this place, not to mention impractical, as there are simply not enough seats. Oliver collects his meal from the buffet-style kitchen and wanders around with his tray looking for an empty 2-seater he can occupy. He sees that there is exactly one and briskly walks towards it, but on the way, he passes by another small table where someone, a woman, is sitting alone reading a comic book. One eye still on the free table, he slows down to take a peek at what she's reading. Recognizing it, he stops and asks the reader, "Is that the new Rat Hands?"
Okay, so Rat Hands is canon in the Dark Universe now.
I
Finally.
have provided no details about Rat Hands. I'm not overwriting anything the fans have said.
Yeah, do we just know there's a comic
book called Rat Hands. That's it.
Great.
The woman looks up. It's Irina, the woman we met in therapy. Oh, sorry, that therapy scene no longer happened. She's the one with the roommate. She's caught off guard, but responds with a smile.
What? Oh, yes, it is.
I didn't know anyone else around here was a fan.
Me neither.
Oliver looks up to see that the free table is still open, but there's another guy approaching with his tray. If Ollie doesn't get moving right now, he's going to lose it. Oliver looks at his competition, then at the table, then back at Irina, and makes a decision. Do you mind if I sit with you? Irina hesitates briefly, then answers.
Sure. Have a seat.
Oliver sets down his tray, careful not to let any of its contents spill into Irina's comic book. It's so cool to see someone who still buys single issues on paper. Honestly, there could be 20 other people in this room reading comics right now, and we'd never know it because they're reading on their phone. Makes it hard to find each other IRL. Irina shrugs, looking back at her book for a moment.
Some people prefer it that way.
Oliver recoils slightly, suddenly feeling as if he's intruded. He goes quiet, and it takes a moment for Irina to notice. She blushes.
Oh, I didn't mean that I did. I just mean to each their own. You know, I like having the floppy magazine in front of me so I can appreciate the layout. Even with trade paperbacks, you can't lay them flat. You know, I can't stand it.
Wow, you're pretty serious about comics.
I tell myself that it's not so much an obsession as a professional curiosity. I'm an illustrator.
No way, I'm a writer. Are you trying to get into comics too?
I'd love that, but I'm not really counting on it. I'm a graphic design major. It's a pragmatic compromise.
Oh, I get that. I'm a creative writing major.
I'm sorry, but in what way is that pragmatic?
I mean, I'm learning to write, like, literature, novels and shit. Which really means I'm learning to become a creative writing professor so that I can take a sabbatical every 3 or 4 years to write a book, which all my current classmates will put on the reading lists for their future creative writing students, allowing me to sell a few thousand copies and visit all of their schools and give lectures to a bunch of kids who won't realize that no one outside our little academic fraternity has ever heard of me.
You're kidding.
It's a legitimate career path. I should know. I own all their books. The two share a laugh. Their eyes meet and they each wait for the other to look away awkwardly, and to their surprise, neither of them do. Oliver extends his hand across the table. I'm Oliver. Irina smiles and shakes it. Their hands linger.
Irina.
Cut to the two of them strolling casually around the campus at sunset. It's a beautiful autumn evening, around dusk. They stroll past the construction site for the campus's upcoming addition, the Joseph Dyer School of Paranormal Studies. So, do you go to that shop in Sunbury? Offset Comics?
Wait, is Joseph Dyer a reference?
To The Exorcist 3, actually, yes.
Oh, yeah. What did we establish what town this college is in?
We didn't, but it's I actually never wrote it down here. It's very, very heavily and specifically based on Susquehanna University, where I went to in central Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay.
We're about to get a little bit of Pennsylvania identifying information. We said it's in Appalachia, so
okay. We're gonna go to a Wawa.
I should probably do that for the sponsorship. Yeah. So, do you go to that shop in Sunbury? Offset Comics?
No, my local place back home mails me my pull list every 2 weeks. I like supporting them. I've been going there since I was 6. Besides, I don't really like Offset. The guy who runs it seems like a creep.
Really? Dale? He's always been super cool to me. Irina makes a face as if she's about to say something, then doesn't. Oliver quickly fills the weird silence. So where is back home for you?
You haven't heard of it, trust me. It's a really, really small town, about 10 miles west of Centralia.
Centralia as in...
The town that's been on fire since 1962.
Wow.
You can actually smell it from the roof of my parents' house if the wind is right.
Ooh, how romantic. Irina laughs, and Oliver blushes, surprising himself by boldly introducing the topic of romance, however obliquely.
How about you? Where did you grow up?
Closer to Philly.
That must have been exciting.
Not really. I didn't go out into the city that much. I'm kind of an indoor cat. I like to read. I like movies, yada yada. Do you like movies?
Yeah, I like movies.
Do you wanna watch one with me? Irina stops walking, pulsing awkwardly on one leg while she looks up at and purses her lips like she just stubbed her toe. Oh, no. Did I misread this? I'm not... sorry. I don't do much
No. You're fine.
Oh, I've always been shit at flirting. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to tell if someone's doing it to me, so I just generally assume people aren't because I don't want to flirt with the wrong person and then look like a creep, and then she tells everybody about this creepy guy who tried to hit on her.
Oliver, it's okay. You haven't misread anything. You seem really nice. I like talking to you. I'm not really available.
Oh, sorry. You didn't mention there being somebody.
There isn't. I'm not available. I can't get involved with anyone. Not in the way you want to get involved.
Well, how do you know how involved I want to get? She gives him a sideways look. I'm serious. Like, yeah, I'm interested in I'm definitely interested, but my roommate, Lewis, he's got a couple girlfriends, and they've each got a couple boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever, and they're all cool with that, and they're all super casual and having a great time or whatever. And like, yeah, that seems totally unfair given that I'm 2 weeks shy of my 20th birthday and have kissed a total of one person, and she wasn't actually allowed to date, and her mother was an immigration lawyer with an address book full of Ukrainian nationals who would happily kick my ass for her if it would help them stay in the country. But I'm not lonely from lack of this. This is rare for me. Like even this, just walking around campus and talking and looking at each other like it's an activity. I don't experience this a lot. This is really good. So whatever it is you don't want to do that you think I can't live without, I'd rather have this. Irina looks at Oliver's face, then cups it in one of her hands. She offers him the kind of smile that you give when you greet a loved one at a funeral, as sad as it is sincere.
I don't want to hurt you.
Oliver is briefly dumbstruck. He closes his eyes and takes in the feeling of her hand on his cheek. She savors it too. When Oliver reopens his eyes, Irina is looking right into them.
We'd have to take things day by day. You'd have to let me set the pace, and you have to trust me when I tell you what I want and where my limits are. And you have to be okay not asking me about it. Can you do that?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Bullshit.
Cut to Lewis in Oliver's dorm room the following day. Lewis is sitting back in his desk chair, looking up at a TV that's perched on the dresser and playing video games. Oliver is pacing around the room's 5 feet of available floor space. Throughout this conversation, Lewis's phone will buzz intermittently, but he'll only be able to peek at text previews because he's busy gaming. What?
I mean, bullshit. I mean, this is a terrible idea.
What? You don't think two people can have a fulfilling romantic relationship without sex? That's like asexual erasure or whatever.
You're not ace, Oliver. I know you jerk off. I'm not always asleep during your secret 2 a.m. jam sessions. I'm just being polite.
Oh, so for that, you'll bite your tongue. But I come here and I tell you I've met somebody and that I'm really excited, and you immediately shit on the whole thing.
Yeah, dog. Masturbation is healthy. If you're this uptight now, I'd hate to see you backed up. But a daily masturbator has no business getting involved with a woman who has heavily implied that there will be no non-autonomous orgasms in his future.
She didn't say that exactly. She just said she'd have hard limits and we'd figure them out as we go. And that's fine with me.
That's fine with you today, because right now you have the sexual experience of a high school freshman and would probably cut off your right hand if it meant the left got to touch a boob. But there's a reason why the baseball analogy for sex is so popular, even though nobody gives a shit about actual baseball. It's apropos as fuck. Every base you reach makes you more ambitious to reach the next one. You inch your way over, hoping you don't get caught before it's safe to go for it. Nobody wants to get stranded at second.
Jesus, Lewis, do you have to make everything into a bit?
I don't know, Oliver. Why does everything have to be so fucking funny?
Lewis groans and throws his hands into the air, dropping his controller.
Jesus Christ. See what my incredible banter cost me? This guy just absolutely kicked my ass.
Please, look at this dude's rank. You would have got creamed anyway. Lewis has just lost a game of Tekken 8 to a user named Quasimodo. I gotta throw these little Easter eggs in, because otherwise there's nothing. Lewis gives Oliver his full attention for the first time in this scene.
Oliver, seriously, if this is what you really want, then I'm super happy for you. I just want you to make sure you're being honest with yourself. And with, what's her name?
Irina.
Right, Irina. Can't wait to meet her.
It's right about now that Alice enters the room totally casually, like she lives here. Who's Irina?
Ollie's new girlfriend.
She's not my girlfriend. We're just hanging out. Ooh, all right. Ollie's off the bench. She's in the game. It's about time. Alice offers Oliver a high five, and he, blushing, accepts. Now we've established our characters and the voice of the movie, and I got to start summarizing some stuff.
I was going to say, we are 20 pages in, which is a third of your script.
Yeah.
And this has all been pretty much in real time, the script. But we are a third of the way, and it seems like it's
with
just
a lot
been,
of these, it's a lot of Act 1. It's a lot of Act 1. Oliver and Irina start dating, and it's pretty cute. It seems to be something they both really need. We see Irina let her guard down a little bit. She and Oliver have been seen sharing their first kiss, and it's a really good one.
So they can kiss?
They can kiss.
Okay.
The two of them make out, and as soon as the petting gets heavy, Irina gently pushes Oliver back. They steady their breathing, throw on a movie, and cuddle. This, by the way, if I was going to throw in any lyrics from the Bowie movie, I would have her say, "Just be still with me," at some point.
Okay, there we go.
Irina and Oliver are on a date off campus in nearby Sunbury, walking through a farmer's market and debating the virtues of digitally recoloring classic comics. Oliver is pro, Irina is anti. Along their walk,
Irina is right.
Yes. Along their walk, a small flower bush catches Irina's eye, and Oliver takes note. Hey, want to adopt a plant?
I shouldn't. I've killed a lot of houseplants.
Hey, I've never killed any, so it balances out.
Have you ever had a houseplant?
I used to have a plushie of Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors. Does that count?
Used to.
I retract the statement. Come on, let's buy a plant. We can take care of it together. It'll be fun. They kiss on it and purchase the potted bush. This cute moment is interrupted when Oliver gets a phone call from his parents. This might take a bit. Do you mind if I walk on my own?
Sure. I'll be around here.
They kiss. Oliver wanders off, leaving Irina holding the new plant baby. A moment later, Irina hears someone speaking to her from one of the market stalls. He's sweet. I hope you're being careful. Startled, Irina turns in the direction of the strange voice and sees a woman, mid-50s, strikingly beautiful, played by Gillian Anderson. This is Rebecca Judd. Her stall sells herbs.
Wait, isn't Rebecca Judd an actress?
No, that's Ashley Judd.
There's not a Rebecca Judd?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I retract my statement.
This is Rebecca Judd. Her stall sells herbs, teas, and spices. Irina doesn't recognize her, but is drawn in her direction anyway.
Do I know you?
No, but we're family. You sense it, don't you? Irina does sense it. She backs away a little. You want that boy, don't you? You shouldn't let him get that close. It's going to end badly. Irina tries to say something back, but can't find her voice. She just turns away and runs. Rebecca watches her from her booth. Later, Oliver finds Irina on a sidewalk bench, steadying herself. Hey, you okay?
Yeah. I'm feeling a little tired. Can we head back?
Sure, as soon as we pick a name for this plant.
We have to name it?
Yeah, that way we'll be motivated to keep it alive.
Sure. We could call it Planty.
That's the best you can do? Planty? The joking around eases the tension, and they walk off together. We've seen Oliver and company workshopping their craft. Let's see what Irina's artistic life is like. We check into sequential art, the only course where she gets to follow her passions. This is an unconventional studio class where students each work at their stations in the medium of their choosing. Some of the students are drawing on pencil or with a light pen and a laptop. Irina is sitting at an easel working with charcoal on paper. Her professor strolls by and has a look at her work. Interesting. I like that you're contrasting the simple, cartoony characters against a more impressionistic environment. We see that Irina is working on a page of a graphic novel. It's set in early colonial America. A young woman is being chased by an angry mob of Puritans at the direction of a towering figure.
Thank you. I'm going for a grim fairy tale sort of thing. The characters are sort of simple. I don't think they're even fully aware of how cruel and terrible their world is until it's already swallowed them up. They weren't made for each other.
The professor points at the towering figure directing the mob. Except for him.
He's different. He is the world. Or the world is for him. He's the minister who puts the curse on the village.
And you said this is based on some obscure folktale? Irina studies the face of the frightened young woman in the drawing.
Just an old family legend.
Now less awkward around other couples, Oliver and Irina have started joining Lewis, Alice, and a rotating crew of friends and other people they're fucking for meals in the dining hall. The vibes are pretty good. Alice and Irina also start developing their own friendship. I'd like to include a scene where Irina asks Alice about her unattached, quasi-polyamorous sex life, so that we can establish something pretty critical to our story. Not everybody wants to be in an open or polyamorous relationship.
Is this directed at me?
No, this is just important context for the characters. Some people want exactly one person to share their life with exclusively. Some romantic conflicts can be solved by everybody just shacking up together, but I'm going to make a text right here. Irina is not built for it. She says so. We will take her word for it.
I like that.
That's a Band-Aid because we'll get to it.
Okay, because it seems kind of interesting because I guess maybe considering our fan base, maybe... As I'm like, usually you don't need to specify.
No, you don't
that
usually
people
specify,
don't
but
like
because
to be
of our fan base, I want to be
polyamorous.
like, listen, I understand that a lot of times the solution that fans come up with for any love triangle or romantic conflict is like, why don't they all just fuck each other?
Mm-hmm.
I am making it text right now. That's not an option in this story. You can write your fan fiction however you want. In the text of this story, Irina is not down to share or be shared. Okay. To further complicate this, I'd like to establish a little sexual tension between Irina and Lewis, but mostly because Lewis cultivates sexual tension with just about everyone.
Okay, there's an easy solution here, which is just she should be with both of them.
One particular evening, Alice is holding court at the gang's table in the dining hall. Absolutely. I can make anything problematic. Watch. The next person who says something to us, the first thing they say, whatever it is, I'm going to throw a fit about it. As luck would have it, it's Kenzie, the student from the writer's workshop who was uncomfortable with Lewis's reading. She approaches the table.
Hey, Alice, Ollie, Lewis. Melissa just got a really encouraging rejection letter from Harper's, so we're throwing a party at the writer's house to celebrate.
Irina quietly chuckles to herself at how low these writing students have set the bar for themselves.
There's going to be beer and pizza, and everyone's welcome.
Everyone at the table looks at Alice, who has already put on her most shocked, offended face. Everyone's welcome? Really? Pizza and beer don't sound terribly welcoming to people with a gluten allergy, Kenzie. What are they supposed to do? Just stand around and watch people eat and get drunk and feel excluded from the whole experience? The table tries to hide their snickering. Kenzie, however, doesn't even blink.
Hey, it's okay. Don't even worry about that. There's going to be gluten-free vegan pizza there too. None of the local pizzerias here make one that's both vegan and gluten-free. Fucking assholes. So I'm actually making it from scratch.
Alice is flustered. Oh, that's very considerate of you. Kenzie gives Alice a friendly jab on the shoulder.
I got you, sister. See y'all there?
The whole table mumbles in the affirmative, holding in their laughter until Kenzie is out of earshot. Wow, that backfired.
You know what this means.
That I have to go to this party and eat nothing but chalky homemade pizza all night?
Yep.
You know, I never actually said I had a gluten allergy. While the gang all riffs on this for a while, Oliver turns to Irina, with whom he's been sitting cozily on a booth bench seat. What do you think? Want to go celebrate somebody almost getting into a literary magazine?
I'm not really a house party kind of person.
Oh, me neither. But this is a writer's house party. Smash cut to Lewis standing on a coffee table with his shirt open, reading loudly and dramatically from an unstapled manuscript.
She presses him to the wall, digging her fingernails into his chest as he blindly fumbles with his belt buckle.
He finishes a page and flings it into the air. It wafts down to the floor where his peers, including Oliver, Irina, and Alice, sit cross-legged, nursing beers, laughing and cheering him on. Everyone's pretty sauced.
He's taking too long. She pulls his hands away from his waistband, pins one wrist to the wall, and, with her free hand, whips his belt off and flings it into the corner. As she defeats the other minor obstacles in her way, she leans in close, breathes up his neck, squeezes his earlobe between her teeth and lower lip before whispering, "I."
The crowd erupts with hoots and howls. Alice bangs on the floor with her palm. Lewis keeps reading, but our focus shifts to a corner of the room, where Irina sits, leaning back into Oliver's arms. She's smiling and laughing with the others, but her breathing is picking up. Goosebumps perk up on her arm where it overlaps with Oliver's. Oliver notices. His hands are already wrapped around her waist. He leans forward and places one small kiss by her ear. A question. Irina turns back to find his lips. They kiss. No one's watching. She turns to face him, and they start making out. Oliver's hands run down Irina's back past her hips. Suddenly, Irina takes a sharp breath and sits up, clutching a hand to her mouth. She suddenly gets to her feet and flees the scene, leaving Oliver stunned on the floor. Lewis sees this from his perch, but is too occupied with his performance to say anything about it. He just shoots Oliver a sort of, "What did I tell you?" look and keeps reading. Oliver follows Irina out into the hallway, where more students are hanging out and chatting. Irina runs down the hall, still covering her face, until she makes it to the bathroom, slamming and locking the door behind her. In the hall, Oliver talks to the door. "Irina, are you okay? What happened?" Inside, Irina runs to the sink, looking down at the water, hyperventilating. She looks up at the mirror. Her lips have changed shape, split like a cat's mouth, revealing long, sharp teeth inside. Her eyes have turned yellow, her pupils thinning into vertical slits. She stifles a scream, turning away from the mirror and crumbling to a fetal position on the floor. End of Act 1.
Okay, so we have our first little cat people tease. I think my biggest note on Act 1 is just that I think we got to get there sooner.
Yeah, I agree. I was having a lot of fun with these characters.
I can tell.
And
they are very fun. This is very Kevin Williamson so far. It even opens with Kevin Williamson's favorite scene, which is a bunch of students in a class discussing the future themes of the movie in a educational context, which Kevin Williamson puts in every movie he does. And in that, like, it feels like a very sort of late 90s, early 2000s movie in that kind of way.
Yeah, I also was realizing as I wrote it that I kind of like the idea of this being a movie you could make for like $20 million. Like, it's got a small cast, it's got mostly a single setting, where like the campus is the setting.
Yeah.
And we're now at the end of Act 1, and there's been like 2 to a special makeup effects.
I also wonder. I don't know how this is going to develop or how it affects our dark universe, but I almost think it would be fun to be a 90s period piece. Now that is 20 plus years, 25 years in the rear view,
sure.
Having it be like a late 90s period piece. Like, I feel like we've gotten some of those from like coming of age stories in the 90s, but we haven't gotten many like college kids in the 90s kind of period piece. And it could be fun, but I don't know if it works with our timeline.
It's the kind of thing where like you'd have to make it more specific. I already feel like I've bent a little bit. Like the college life here is much more, it's like pretty specifically based on my experience from 2007 to 2011, which is already not contemporary.
Yeah.
But also there, the idea that people are aware of the supernatural and there's sort of a sense of panic around it, everyone's just kind of living with, is baked into this. It's something that I actually originally had more of a subplot about in Heaven's Gate. I had there was going to be like a preacher character who
Interesting.
was played by Glenn Powell, who was going to be like stoking the flames of paranoia around the idea of hell. And here I just kind of have it as a way to crank up everybody's like fight, flight, or fuck reflex.
One of the things that because I've been doing more full screenwriting, we've talked about, I've been trying to get an actual screenplay made.
Right.
You can follow my journey doing that on the Discord, but the sort of learning how to where to put certain actions. Like right now we're at page 27. With the stuff we summarized, we'd probably be at about page 35, 40.
Yeah,
which means
and that's
we're almost
too far.
40 minutes into the movie before we get our transformation. And also, I actually went through my what I'm calling now Looking Glass Lagoon, and had to cut some stuff out from the beginning because I basically needed to get Rita to the lagoon by page 20. Because a lot of times, if you're submitting a screenplay, that's as far as people are going to read before they know whether they're in or out,
Right. You have to hook the reader.
And eventually the viewer, but at first the reader. And at this point, I feel like we've not ended our act one, but just gotten to our story hook.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of these act
we're almost
breaks,
halfway through the script you've written.
Right. I've thrown a lot of the act breaks that I've put in here. I don't think are really, we're going to get to end of act two because it's a place where we can stop and talk, be like, we're still in act two. And then I only end up really only having about 10 pages of act three. But again, these are sketches of scripts.
Your act one is not much of a sketch.
No, act one is pretty fucking filled out.
Yeah.
But I feel like because there is all this sort of rom-com type energy and it's sort of like a youthful ensemble dramedy or whatever, that there's not a lot of plot. What there is to dig into is the character dynamics. And so I don't really feel like you would get invested if I just described this to you. Which maybe is a problem if you're trying to sell the movie to somebody. But for the purposes of this pod, I don't know what I would get rid of. I don't know what I would change. I think it moves pretty briskly because these pages are so packed with dialogue.
Yeah, it's moving really fast. I mean, we're only at the hour mark, and which is actually pretty short for us these days, being at the hour mark and finishing act one. But I also don't have a lot of feedback yet because it feels like we're just getting started. The characters are all really fun, of course. You write really fun characters. I don't know how much on the pod, and I can cut this if you want me to. You want to get into maybe some of the personal influences in here. I feel like Oliver and Lewis feel very familiar to me.
Yeah.
Knowing you in your personal life.
Listen, every character I write is at least some projection of myself because I am not a very creative person. No, because I think that's how people write. People have to just I think that writing and acting are very similar crafts. And part of that is finding out okay, what do I have in common with this person and where do I differ from this person? And one of the things I wanted to do is I like to prism myself out into characters like I did with Gwen and Larry, right? And allow I think that the most interesting character dynamics are between people who are really parts of a single person. They have the best arguments. And so Oliver is very much sort of a more and more, I think, a critique, and maybe too gentle of a critique of myself when I was in my teens and early 20s. And we'll get more into picking him apart in the next act.
We've talked on here about you being maybe a late bloomer sexually.
Yes.
But also his like thing about like I don't know when people are flirting with me. I don't know how to flirt back. Like you and I have had that conversation like verbatim on our way to get pizza between episodes.
To this day, that's me. It's just like right now it doesn't matter because I'm happily married and not looking for anything new.
Yeah.
So the best thing for me to do is to ignore when people flirt with me.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I think it probably makes me seem all that much more intriguing and inaccessible in that way that will intrigue people. And then Lewis is sort of like both like a kind of composite of a couple people in my life, and also kind of a parody of the way that I tend to speak, which is that I have the processor for my trying to be witty and clever overclocked at all times to an extent that it's kind of fucking annoying a lot of the time. Like, it's always fun to impress people who don't know me with how quickly I can come up with something that's like, that seems like I wrote it. It's not always adding anything. It's often just like, okay, we get it. You can do that. That's a skill that you have. You're just, this conversation wasn't about you until you decided to make it one with your bullshit. So Lewis is kind of a little bit of that. And also just gets to play as sort of just like a really good foil to Oliver. It's just being, Oliver is somebody who is, we can get to more of it later, but I think we can kind of say is a little bit in denial of his sexual impulses. And Lewis is the opposite of that. He follows all of them shamelessly. And Alice gets to kind of be somewhere in between the two of them, and that she gets to be kind of as genuine. She gets to be a more genuine version of Oliver with all of the kind of fun and wit and vivaciousness of Lewis.
Yeah. One thing that I do like here is that so far it has almost no overlap with either Cat People version, other than there is a woman who is afraid of having sex.
I've pulled only a handful of bullet points, and they're all things that happen in both films.
Yeah.
We have a scene in the first act where someone recognizes Irina as "you're one of those," and gives her sort of like a cryptic warning. This one's more of one. Yeah. Like you can imagine, I haven't brought in Gillian Anderson to play a character who appears in a single scene.
Sure,
we're going to see her again.
Yeah,
and then there will be a scene from Act 3 of that movie that is in both of them that I had to include a version of.
I know what
you probably know which one it is. The 42 version, it's the scene. It's so fucking good.
If you know, then you know a scene we're talking about. But I like that because I feel like in some of your pitches, you have relied on the source material to give you your jumping off point, right? We talked about that with Jekyll and Hyde, because you sort of write as you go and figure out the story as you go. You're like, well, let me start with the original movie and just see where I sort of have the instinct to branch off. But you actually start from a very different place here, which I like that for you as a writer, that this seems to be very whole cloth new.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why I full on just changed the title of the movie, because the story that I'm telling here is plainly inspired by Cat People, and it will hit a lot of the same beats, but it really went off in its own direction. And ended up being a really fun way for me to finally tell a story set in fucking writing school. Yeah. Which is fun. It also allows me to get meta, which is occasionally fun to do if you don't overdo it.
Yeah, I think there's a nice meta quality to you in particular having a movie called Kill Your Darlings and being like, I don't know what I would cut from here.
Sure. Yes, I did cut some stuff though.
You
did
kill some darlings. There was a therapy scene apparently that we missed. But let's keep going. I'm sure I will have more to say as we start to see more of the cat.
Act 2 is chunky. So, Act 2. It's around noon the next day. Oliver is face down on his bed, wearing the clothes he wore to the party, even his sneakers. Lewis enters, also wearing last night's outfit. He looks at his phone, not noticing that Oliver is even in the room. He thoughtlessly throws his backpack onto Oliver's bed, and thus onto Oliver. Ow!
Oh, wow, you're still in bed? It's like 12:30.
I'm not in bed. I'm on bed. Lewis peers over and sees that Oliver is above the covers. His shoes are still on, but he's lying at such an odd angle that they're not actually touching the sheets. He probably walked in last night, immediately collapsed, and has not moved since.
What happened with you and Irina last night?
Oliver sits up on the edge of the bed. I don't know. She got really upset all of a sudden and wouldn't come out of the bathroom. Eventually, Kenzie chased me off. Now I gotta worry about what she thinks happened.
Has Irina texted you or anything?
Nope, I'm on red.
You two were looking pretty chummy during my smut reading last night.
Yeah,
Too chummy for Sister Mary Robert, perhaps?
I don't know. Probably. I feel like such a creep.
You're not a creep. You're just stupid.
What the fuck, man?
In a very normal 19-year-old boy way.
Oh, so stupid like you.
Yes, praise Jesus. Stupid like me. Is that so bad? Would it kill you to admit that you have like some normal human flaws and that maybe it's not wrong to want things?
Irina doesn't...
I'm not talking about Irina. I'm talking about you, dude. You need to admit that this fucking chastity experiment is not going to work out. If somebody gets in line at Wendy's at 10:31 a.m. and can't get breakfast, who's being the asshole? The server pointing to the sign that says breakfast until 10:30, or the unruly customer who should just go next door to Taco Bell where they have breakfast till 11?
As usual, the person being the asshole is you, Lewis. Oliver gets up and storms out the door, grabbing his bag along the way. Cut to Irina sitting alone on a public bus. A few rows in front of her, she sees a couple in their late 20s laughing together. They kiss with intent. Irina turns away and looks out the window. She gets off in Sunbury and finds her way to the farmer's market, wandering around until she finds the teas, herbs, and spices stall of Rebecca Judd. I knew you'd come back.
Who are you?
My name's Rebecca. She extends her hand. Hesitantly, Irina shakes it.
Is there somewhere we can talk?
Cut to Rebecca's apartment. A small place, definitely meant for one person. There's a serious Earth Mother vibe here. There are potted plants and vines all around, the source of her wares at the farmer's market. They sit down and drink some tea.
So, you're like me?
Yes, sometimes we can sense each other. A lot of curses are like that.
I didn't know that. I don't know much about it, to be honest.
But someone had to explain it to you at some point. Your mother, I assume?
My grandmother. It's on my dad's side. She told me the legend. I'm not sure I believe it. Do you?
Rebecca picks her tea off the coffee table and takes a sip. Doesn't matter. The curse is real. It was probably easier to live with when the cursed women were still cloistered in their religious community, which was already preaching that sex was solely for reproduction, but also that women had to submit to their husbands on demand. They weren't expecting to enjoy sex. They only knew to be afraid of it. Then came feminism, vibrators, the internet, a culture where you're reminded to think about sex every 38 seconds. The effort is...
exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Does it get any easier?
I thought it would when I hit menopause, but... Rebecca retrieves a pack of cigarettes from her purse and lights one.
How many of us are there?
I don't know. Outside of my family, I've only met 3 my whole life, including you. We don't have a Facebook group or anything like that. So far as I can tell, there's not even an agreed-upon term for what we are.
Well, don't count on me for that. Apparently I'm bad at naming things. My boyfriend's a writer. Maybe he can come up with something.
Rebecca puts her cigarette in an ashtray in front of her and looks Irina dead in the eyes. You can't tell him. Ever.
What?
You can't tell anyone. It only makes things more dangerous for all of us, including for him. Love and fear are a bad combination, no matter what the Catholics say. You have to break things off with him. The sooner the better. You can't have a relationship. Not a good one, anyway.
My grandmother did it. Your mother did it.
And was she happy, your grandmother? Would you want her life? Her marriage? Irina doesn't have an answer. Trust me, Irina, I've tried everything. I've been a beard, I've tried living with women, Buddhists, devout Christians, asexuals. It never works out because even if they weren't being denied anything they wanted, I wasn't getting what I wanted. You can try to hide it, but anyone worth staying with is eventually going to notice how frustrated and resentful you've become. In the long run, nobody wants to spend their life with someone they can't satisfy. Cut to Irina on the bus back to campus. She opens the text app on her phone and goes back through the dozen unanswered messages from Oliver. She presses her head against the bus window as if she's trying to crack the glass, then calms herself. She texts Oliver. Can we talk? They meet under a tree in the campus quad. It's peaceful there, and it also helps us to not have every scene in somebody's bedroom. I'm sorry if I went too far last night or broke the rules. I can do better.
Ollie, slow down. We both got carried away. But I warned you from the start that it would be like this, and you told me you could handle it.
Yeah. I don't know. This is harder than I thought. I've never felt like this before.
Me neither.
Like, I'm an adult. I get that we've been together for all of 2 months, and it's stupid to act like this is the last relationship I'm ever going to have, but right now, I don't want to be with anybody else. I definitely want to be with somebody.
Honestly, Ollie, it's fucked up that you have a harder time saying the word sex than I do.
I want to have sex. I don't need to have it today or even this year, but eventually. And I don't like the idea that you and I could be together for all that time, getting closer, falling in love, and then just bang, hit a wall. It's just going to suck more. Irina studies her shoes. I feel like shit for giving you an ultimatum like this. It feels like toxic dude shit 101. I just need to know, do you think there will ever come a day where you're going to want me the way I want you?
I do want you.
What?
I do want you.
Irina is in tears. Oliver reaches for her, second guesses himself, then slams his fist against the tree trunk behind him. I don't understand. Please help me understand. Mentally, Irina pulls off a Band-Aid. She turns to him, kisses him hard. He kisses back. Then she pulls away to catch her breath and wipe her tears.
Let's do it.
What?
Let's just go for it. Let's have sex.
Really? Because there's still a ton of other stuff we haven't. Irina shoots him a look that shuts him up. Oh, okay, I'm in. Whatever you want. When?
Friday night? Your place?
This Friday?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask Lewis to stay somewhere else that night. God knows he's got options. And I'll go to the health center and pick up some protection. Irina stifles a laugh at that last word, wiping another tear from her eye.
Yeah. Protection. I would like to ask the audience, do Dylan and I have sexual chemistry with each other? Is it palpable?
I have had enough public creative relationships where people ship me and the other person.
We have had one person on Twitter publicly ship us. And this episode is for them.
You can do whatever you want. Just don't tell me about it.
Definitely no fan art.
Yeah, no thanks.
We do not want to see
no,
that.
I
no
don't
fix.
I'm personally, I'm not into the idea of romantic fan fiction about real people.
Yeah. And
but,
definitely not on the Discord. Where we have
just keep it out of sight. There's a Reddit we don't look at.
That no one's used.
I don't think anyone uses it because they're all hanging out on the Discord because that's the place to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you ever want to discuss our show somewhere where we're not policing you, go to the subreddit. I deliberately don't check it for that very reason. Oliver returns to his dorm and finds Alice chilling on Lewis's bed, reading. Oh, hey yourself. Is Lewis around? He's in chem lab. I'm just hanging out. Oh, I was going to ask his advice about something. Alice sits up. Is it something I can help with? Strangely comfortable, Oliver decides that it is. Irina and I are planning to have sex. Alice tosses her book aside and sits up. Oh, excellent. Good for you two. First time for you both? Yes, or I'm pretty sure. On her end. Definitely my first time. I figured I should consult Lewis about it, given that it's his one area of expertise. Oh, but this is so much better. You want to learn about women? Talk to a woman. More guys should know this. You're cool talking to me about sex? If you're cool talking to me about it, apparently I am.
Also, does Dylan have sexual chemistry with himself?
Oh, most definitely. Cut to a little bit later. Oliver is in Lewis's desk chair, pulled up to the bed. He and Alice are deep into a very fun, casual conversation. See, this is where you're better off talking to me. Lewis would give you, like, a list of moves. And the guy's got great moves, don't get me wrong. Best moves on campus. Love his moves. But moves alone aren't going to get the job done. It's like pro wrestling. Do you watch wrestling? Oliver shakes his head. It's fun. You'd like it. Anyway, every pro wrestler has their individual shtick.
I take it back. Oliver's not like you. Not at all.
Anyway, every wrestler has their individual shtick. Signature maneuvers, catchphrases, finishers. But you wouldn't want to watch a match where two people were just doing moves at each other. Even if those moves were really cool. You got to tell a story. You need setup, anticipation, denial. Denial is the most fun. So that the payoff is, explosive. You're a writer. You get it. Tell a story together. Take turns leading each other. Give her cues and watch out for hers. Hell, you're new at this. Just talk to each other. They never do it in the movies, but it makes things so much better when you just communicate rather than expecting everything to just come together. Sorry, I've been going on and on. Do you get what I'm saying, though? Something about professional wrestling? Yeah, but also, don't overthink it. You just gave me 100 things to think about. Alice leans forward and takes Oliver's hands. Hey, don't worry. Just take your time, listen to each other, and when in doubt, I have never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with more lube. They share a laugh. Thank you. You're really easy to talk to. Hey, that's what makes me dangerous. I'm a whole new kind of other woman. That's a line from the 42 version.
Nice.
The two smile at each other, and there's a pregnant pause. At this moment, Lewis walks in the door looking puzzled.
What are you guys talking about?
Oliver looks up at Lewis. I need to buy lube.
You can probably just borrow some of Lewis's.
He's not going to borrow Lewis's lube. I know that obviously it's in a container and it's not like it gets reused. It's a dignity thing. He's not going to ask for Lewis.
Personal recommendation, Uber Lube. It's the best stuff out there. Get yourself a jar of Uber Lube. Works for everything. You can even use it as a moisturizer.
I have no brand loyalty when it comes to lube. It's what's on sale.
Uber Lube. It'll change your life.
Irina sits in the sparsely populated campus art studio in front of a paper pad and an easel. She's working on another charcoal drawing. She's using long, sweeping lines at first, creating smooth curves that evoke a slender woman's silhouette. We intercut with another scene where a ruggedly handsome man we've never seen before sits at a bar, sipping a beer. A woman sits at the stool next to him with a glass of wine. We don't see her face, but when he does, he smiles. Irina fills in more of the negative space on her paper with black charcoal, using the side of her compressed charcoal stick. The drawing now evokes a woman in a tight black dress. The ruggedly handsome man primps in a bathroom mirror. He steps out of the bathroom into his rustic living room with antlers on the wall, a real bearskin rug in front of a lit stone fireplace. He approaches his fine leather couch.
Now, where were we?
He picks up an open beer from the coffee table and takes a seat beside a woman in repose. It's Rebecca Judd. Where do you want to be?
Now, there's a leading question.
Oh no, well, the lead's all yours. On that cue, the man leans in and kisses Rebecca. Irina fills in more of the figure with charcoal. She's losing her calm, her face almost in a snarl now as her strokes become more jagged and angry. It's getting harder to tell what she's drawing. Rebecca and the stranger are making out furiously on the couch. From our angle, we see Rebecca's fingers grip the man's hair. The rest of her is out of frame. Irina, with angry tears in her eyes, scribbles more with her charcoal and then performs one final dramatic stroke. She stares at her drawing like it's her lifelong nemesis. She knocks it over sideways, changing its orientation for the viewer. It's now an angular, abstract rendering of a vicious black panther. In the stranger's house, we see Rebecca's hand clench up, the hair on her skin thickening and darkening. Claws burst from her fingertips, and she swipes down hard across the man's face. He screams, and we cut away. It's the big night. Irina nervously approaches the door to Oliver's dorm room. She raises her hand up to knock on the door, hesitates, then finally commits. Oliver answers, looking like he's dressed for a date. Button-down shirt, flattering jeans, and a fresh haircut. Hey.
Hi.
Oh, I'm going to give the warning here. This is the scene where things get, pretty difficult. And I will try to put a timestamp when this act is over, and we'll recap.
What type of difficult?
It's going to be incredibly awkward, uncomfortable sex scene.
Is anything going to be non-consensual?
I don't think so.
Okay, because I know that I want to be specific with our trigger warnings.
Right, otherwise they're not useful.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Oliver welcomes her in. The room is cleaner and neater than we've ever seen it. The fluorescent overhead light is switched off, and there's a half dozen lit candles spread out around the room. It's not a big, silly, or overly dramatic decoration. It's a modest demonstration of genuine effort. When Irina removes her coat, we see that she's dressed like any other night. I hope I didn't overdo it. I haven't really been able to think about much else this week, so I gave myself some stuff to do. And I wanted to set the stage, I guess. Do you like it? With her back to Oliver, Irina once again fights against that sad smile.
Let's blow out the candles, okay?
Oh, okay, that's fine. Do you want the regular light on?
No.
Oliver blows out each of the candles until the only illumination is rows of moonlight through the window blinds. It starts to rain outside, and there's a steady pitter-patter on the windows. Oliver slowly approaches Irina, and they kiss slowly and gently. When it starts to heat up a little, Oliver puts his hand on Irina's hip, just slightly intruding under her shirt. Irina gently pushes him back and takes a step away, still facing him. She starts to undress herself, much in the manner that she would if there were no one else in the room. After a moment, Oliver does the same, occasionally looking up at her to find that she's not looking back. Now undressed, Irina walks to the twin bed, barely acknowledging Oliver on the way. She gets in under the covers. Oliver stands over her, trying to determine what to do next. None of this is going as he imagined. Irina maintains a calm, nearly flat affect for the rest of the scene.
Are you ready?
Oliver has no response.
You should put a condom on.
Oliver snaps to it like an amateur actor who's embarrassed to have missed a cue. He retrieves a string of condoms from the top drawer of his nightstand, tears off one packet, and opens it. From a medium shot, we see him struggling to put it on.
We're going to see his dick?
No, a medium shot, waist up.
Oh, okay. You okay?
Yeah, I guess I'm not all the way ready.
Look.
Oliver looks up at Irina as she pulls away the covers, reminding him of the naked woman lying in his bed. Yeah, that's helping.
Good. Now come here.
Oliver gets in bed with Irina. He embraces her, kissing her lips and neck. She's barely reacting. He stops. Is this okay? Are you okay?
It's fine. I'm fine. I'm ready.
Oliver resumes kissing her, but then she rests her fingers against his mouth.
I mean, I'm ready.
Oh, you don't want to... Irina shakes her head. Oliver hesitates. Give me a second. I can get some lube.
Just fuck me, Oliver.
Oliver sputters. He throws off the covers and sits up on the edge of the bed. He puts his head in his hands.
Ollie.
Give me a second! Irina just lies back. She looks up at the ceiling, trying to remain as stoic and calm as possible. I can't do this. Not like this. It's like you're not even here with me. Irina tears up, still looking at the ceiling. Oliver's back is to her.
I'm trying to give you what you want.
You think this is what I want? You think I want to use you like a fucking sex doll? Or like this is just some animal impulse that I can just get out of the way? Irina's mask breaks. She skips past crying directly to sobbing. She rolls away to face the wall. Oliver leans forward like he's going to retch.
Do you want me to leave?
I want you to talk to me. I want you to explain all of this. Will you do that?
No.
Oliver looks back at Irina. He only sees her back. I guess that's it. Cut to the front door of Oliver's building. Irina steps outside, dressed for the cold, but not the rain. She starts walking across campus towards her own dorm. Her tears are lost in the rainfall, but her anguish on her face only intensifies. She gradually picks up her pace until she finds herself sprinting through the rain, screaming into the night with the fury of a beast. And here's where we'll take our break.
Good for Oliver. No one to say no.
Yeah.
You can say no.
You can. At any time, you are allowed to retract your consent.
And especially if the woman appears non-responsive, and you should maybe take a step back and
yes.
be like, hey, I don't think this is okay.
Yes.
But yes, and also for yourself. If you're not feeling it, there's no pressure to have sex ever.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone makes you feel pressured, dump her.
That's bad.
Dump him.
Yes.
Dump whoever. Dump them. Because that's bad. So good for Oliver for not giving into peer pressure, not giving into arena pressure, and being like, hey, this sucks. I'm going to hit the bricks.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more about Act 2 and dive into the rest of Cat People. Here's an ad for our bonus pod and a little clip from the most recent episode where we played a little game called Trick or Trek and answered your questions from the Discord. Be right back. That does sound like a good idea for an episode.
Thank you. I actually had a lot of fun coming up with my fake ones, and I don't tend to think about Star Trek spec scripts because I've absorbed so many episodes that this is a fun exercise.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you had to come up with something that hadn't been done in 900 episodes.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's so hard.
Which, you're the only person that could do that because anyone else would try to come up with something and it might have already been a Star Trek that they had just forgotten about. But I know there's not a single episode you've forgotten about.
Oh, I mean, there are some pretty forgettable Voyager episodes. Speaking of, Hourglass, Voyager, 1998. Inside a temporal anomaly, Voyager encounters a perfect copy of itself traveling backwards in time. In order to escape the anomaly, the forwards and backwards crews must figure out how to communicate and work together before their timelines collide, killing them both. No guest stars. This is sort of a bottle episode.
Did you just fucking do Tenet as a Star Trek episode?
Either I did or Voyager did in 1998.
This is a temporal pincer movement.
It sounds like a temporal pincer movement.
The entropy has been reversed on the Voyager.
So the question I have to ask is, did I write a Tenet thing? Or did Star Trek do Tenet before Tenet?
This is a good question because you know that I just saw Tenet. So I don't feel like you would do a Tenet riff if you know I just saw Tenet, because then I would know you were making it up. But I think maybe you also wrote these before I saw Tenet.
Really playing the meta on this one, which you have to do, right? Like with
I don't know.
I remember when we were playing Hammer or Scammer, trying to think, okay, does this sound like a Dalton pitch?
Yeah,
right.
I know you love Tenet, so I could see you writing a Tenet.
But Dalton, where does that love of Tenet come from?
Because Tenet's a good movie.
But does it maybe remind me of a Star Trek episode that I like?
It's true. But then why do I love Tenet?
That's right. You're going to find out this is real and you're going to hate Tenet.
Welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? Episode 40, Cat People. We are more than midway through Dylan's Cat People
this
pitch.
Is sort of the narrative midpoint, but there's fewer script pages ahead of us than behind us.
Yeah, I'm finding I'm trying to figure out how to contextualize this film, how to best approach it. It's hard because when you can't see a movie, and you can't see its marketing, and you can't see, all the things that lead up to it, I don't think this can really be approached with the same sort of blockbuster scale that our usual movies are.
It's a very different kind of movie. Like, I think of this as more of like the kind of horror movie that you could get to play at Sundance, and not even necessarily in the midnight section.
So far, I don't know how much of a horror movie it is.
It's not super a horror movie. It's more of a drama.
I like...
It's a monster movie.
Yeah,
but
I like that the transplanting of the premise to college, I think, works very well, because college is a time when nobody knows how to talk about sex, and sex is still very new, and there's a million pressures on you from your peers, from the media, from parents, whatever. You're sort of... you're figuring everything out for the first time, and you're figuring everything out with yourself and with a partner. And I don't know about you, but I did not know how to talk frankly about sex with people when I was in college.
It took me until my late 20s.
And in this case, the cat transformation is a good sort of symbol for that, because it's especially hard to talk about sex when you turn into a cat every time it happens. Which presumably is what is going on here. So I like that you are interested in the premise of cat people as a means of exploring sort of the awkwardness of discovering your sexual identity in college. So far, I don't know how much of a cat people movie this is. Like, it kind of feels like the cat people aspect of it is a part that you're not very interested in. That you're much more interested in the... But
I think if you go back and watch the 42 movie, there's not like... It's sort of like a romantic thriller drama.
True, and that's what I was thinking about.
There's not a ton of monster shit in it, which made me feel like I didn't have to use a lot. Like, I would like there to be more. When we get to the end of the script, I'm sure we're going to have thoughts like, hey, but you didn't X or Y. I'm like, I know. But I think that it's a really good drama with a weird horror twist.
Well,
and that's kind of what I'm trying to
That's the thing is, I was thinking back, like, what this most maps onto, and I think it most maps onto the 40s cat people. That was also sort of the style at the time. Like, I was watching The Fly, too, the original Fly with Vincent Price, and that's another movie where, like, it's almost kind of a police procedural at one point. It's kind of a mystery. And then you sort of get to, a lot of these movies were just a lot of preamble until a sort of Act 3 set piece that everything was building up to.
Yeah, and that's more or less what I've done.
But that is not something that I think happens a lot. I think modern audiences are more inclined to want more consistent plot development and escalation. And that's one of the things when you go back and watch some of these 40s and 50s movies, if it's not something you're familiar with, where they feel slow or they feel like, man, when is it going to get to the cat people stuff, Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of that with there, where it's like there's a lot of great character stuff happening here, but we're 42 pages into a 60-page script, and it's the promise of the premise thing, where like, and in that case, I am glad that you changed the title. Yeah,
that was a thought too.
The title, because then you're not but it is the dark universe, and we are setting this up as our cat people movie, even in like the fiction of where this is coming out.
Right.
Even if it had a different title, it would be. But this is sort of our adaptation of cat people.
But here's how I think we market the movie. Did you see Bones and All?
No.
Okay, so that is a 2022 movie from Luca. I do not remember how to say his name. The director of Call Me By Your Name.
Yes.
And it is about two cannibals.
Right.
Who have to eat people, right?
Yeah.
And it is like a romance. It's like a road trip movie. And there's blood and guts in it. It's not really a horror movie.
Yeah. And there's things like,
I didn't love that movie, to be honest. But
Only Lovers Left Alive is a similar kind of thing. Which begs the question then, would people buy that kind of movie as a dark universe film?
Well, one of the things that we said from the beginning is that we want to not have a specific tone or genre that we're married to.
Yeah.
And I think that over time, we've kind of developed one of ours. Mm-hmm. And this was an opportunity for me to deviate from it. Like, I think this would appeal to a different audience.
Yeah.
It's possible that our listeners are fucking bored to tears right now. But
this is kind of our Holdovers. I know it stars one of the guys from the Holdovers, but it's like that kind of like, quiet, dialogue driven kind of thing. And yeah, like you said, like a Luca Guadagnino, something like that. One of those kinds of indie artsy names that does a lot of Sundance stuff and does these sort of grounded character things. I can definitely see it as that tone. It depends on how meta we want to get with it, because if we were to game this out as like, oh, these are real movies again, people might consider that a cynical move. Like, oh, like Universal with their multi-billion-dollar franchise is now aping these things, but like then they have like the fucking book from, the Dark Legion, like how much people, but in the context of the podcast, we're playing with the new genre.
Sure. And if
fine.
we're also going to play the metagame, this movie would cost nothing.
Sure.
Nothing to make. And so it's the kind of thing that you could take a risk on, right? Like when Marvel decides to throw on Ant-Man cost, I think it was like 60, 80 mil. That was considered to be one of their cheaper ones. This is a $20 million movie. And in a horror, that's not unusual. That's one of the reasons why horror movies based on like original properties or that aren't like big franchises get made, because they have a high return rate. They don't cost much to make.
Yeah.
So this is more like the kind of, I think in some ways is way more like the kind of horror movie that's in right now, like an Immaculate, right? Where it's small, it's short, it's inexpensive, and it appeals to both. It's supposed to anyway. It's marketed to horror fans who want to see horror movies, and also to people who go to see fucking A24 movies.
Yeah.
Right. That is kind of where I see this right now. So I completely accept that it's way different and hard to evaluate by our normal criteria.
Yeah. I don't even know if this is a criticism. I think I am just still 40 pages in acclimating to the tone, because also it's, we don't have the marketing. We don't have the way a film is shot communicates a lot. Like a film, a finished product. I think this about any work of art. I think any work of art communicates its intentions to you in itself. I think, and that is also how I judge any work of art, whether it's a film, whether it's a song, whether it's classical music, whatever. I think a work communicates to you what it's trying to accomplish, and you judge it by how well it accomplishes what it is telling you it's trying to do. That would come through in the cinematography. It would come through in the performances. It would come through in the way it was marketed, which is now a part of these things. And so, it might be partly, especially if you're going in with the expectations of the Dark Universe and the Dark Legion and stuff, you may be surprised at how toned down this is. But I think it's even more surprising in our format where you're hearing this all for the first time. And I'm interested to see where we go, so we can dive back into it.
The next morning, Lewis, Alice, and the rest of their crew are eating breakfast in the dining hall. Oliver comes in breathlessly, like he's been running the whole way here. Lewis gets up, like he's expecting a bro hug.
Ollie, our new graduate!
Instead, he gets a shove that takes him by surprise, but doesn't quite take him off his feet. I never should have listened to you.
What the fuck, Ollie?
Things were fine. Everything was fine, and then you got in my head with your stupid, horny bullshit.
Cool off, bro. What are you even talking about?
You made a whole thing about how me and Irina were doomed because she didn't want to have sex. Then I told her it was make or break for me, and now everything's fucked. And now Alice gets to her feet. Oh, Ollie, I'm sorry.
Was I wrong?
What?
Was anything I said to you not true? Did I fucking make you do anything? All I did was tell you to be honest with yourself. I just want you to be happy.
No, you want me to be more like you.
Right. And that'd be a big step down from being the high and mighty moral compass of the universe, wouldn't it?
Boys, come on. The fight has now drawn the attention of the entire dining hall.
Not a single person here would even know who you are if I hadn't pushed you out of your snail shell, you perks of being a wallflower bitch.
Oh, so you have read a book. I thought all your inspiration came from My Hero Academia fanfic.
Rich from the guy who wants to write picture books for fucking Disney.
Alice puts herself between the two of them. Boys, fucking cool it. Oliver backs off and starts for the door. Before leaving, he turns back and shouts, "You're not actually hot. You're just tall." This hits Lewis like a punch in the chest. There are some giggles from onlookers. Before he can return fire, Oliver is out the door. Alice puts a hand on Lewis's shoulder and he shakes it off. He mutters to himself,
"Damn right I'm tall."
He sits back down at the table and the commotion dies down. He pokes the scrambled eggs with a fork.
"Damn right I'm tall."
For the next few weeks, both Irina and Oliver withdraw socially and focus on their work. Alice tries to remain the connective tissue between the rest of the gang, trying to nurture her new friendship with Irina, to be there for Oliver and still see Lewis, though that relationship is becoming a bit strained, as Lewis is also not his best self right now. As Alice and Lewis grow further apart, Alice and Oliver are getting chummier. This creates an awkward scenario in which Oliver, Lewis, and Irina all attend one of Alice's big swim meets, but pretend they don't see each other. See, I summarized some things. Lewis and Oliver have done a good job at avoiding each other, but today is Oliver's turn at being workshopped in short story class. The same gang from Act 1 is assembled, including Alice, but this time it's Oliver reading an excerpt from his latest draft. As strange as it seemed, Austin wasn't the first person to make this particular request of the hospital staff. So long as it could be positioned as not to infringe on any other patient's privacy, the nurses in the coma ward were happy to ensure that Tracy's new camera was always charged and connected to Wi-Fi whenever possible. Austin kept the Zoom meeting with Tracy open whenever he didn't have another meeting to be in. There was no audio permitted, a privacy condition, but he had a pinhole, a little window in the corner of his desktop, opening into the rest of his life, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. Professor Joe kicks off the discussion. Thank you, Oliver. I have to say, this was a surprising story for you. I kept expecting some kind of sci-fi twist, like maybe Austin was actually a robot or something.
Who says he's not?
What makes you say that, Lewis?
He doesn't feel like a real person. He's just a collection of virtues and values. And this story is barely a story. It's like the world's saddest campaign commercial.
There are laughs from throughout the room. Oliver squirms in his seat. Joe gestures for people to simmer down. Okay, reel it in a little. Remember, we're not here to score points at our colleagues' expense. Kenzie speaks up.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Lewis is right. The author spends the entire story propping up his protagonist like an idol at the expense of all narrative tension. He's an adoring husband, a doting father, a diligent worker. Meanwhile, every other character he encounters seems to exist only to tempt him off of his righteous path, and it never works. His brother-in-law who wants to pull the plug, the flirty coworker, even his traumatized teenage daughter, and they're all framed essentially the same way. Austin never seems to judge anybody, but he doesn't have to because the voice of the author does it for him. It's like Oliver is playing defense for him.
Now, Alice starts playing defense for Oliver. Okay, so admittedly, Austin is on the bland side, but is it necessary for all literary protagonists to be tragic antiheroes? Can't a reader also take inspiration from the perseverance of a good person thrust into an awful situation?
Sure they can. I just don't think that's what's going on here.
Another student nails it. It's smug. Kenzie snaps her fingers and points to the student.
That's it. That's it exactly. It feels like a Bible story. Here's how you're supposed to behave, and if you do any different, you're lesser.
Oliver, who has been taking notes throughout this conversation, has lost the will to do so. Alice gives him a sympathetic look. Lewis sits cross-armed in his chair. His turn to be smug. After class, Alice walks across campus with the creatively bloodied Oliver. It's the same quiet path that Ollie walked earlier, near the paranormal studies construction site. I got fucking bodied in there, man. No, you... Okay, yeah, you did. But that's what workshop is for. As lame as it sounds, you really do learn more from failure. I just put so much myself into this one, you know? And everyone hated it. It's hard not to take that personally. Am I smug? Alice scrunches her face, parsing her language. You're a little pruned. A little prude? Pruned. Like a tree in a suburban neighborhood. If you see something in yourself you think might be unsightly, you trim it down or cut it off. It's more presentable, but then you never get to find out what might have grown there. A wave washes over Oliver, like he's briefly lightheaded. He finds the nearest bench and sits. Alice sits beside him. Wow. You okay? Yeah, it's just kind of crazy to suddenly see yourself so acutely through someone else's eyes. That image is pretty apropos, right? Yeah, honestly, Alice, I never knew you paid that close attention. I'm not the only one. Lewis sees you pretty well, too. Yeah, but how come I don't mind so much when you do it? It's probably because I'm pretty, and you like me. Oliver looks up at Alice. She's smiling at him, leaning in his direction. You should kiss me. I should? That doesn't sound like a thing I would do. Maybe that's why you should do it? They kiss.
I knew there was sexual tension between you and you.
In her dorm room, alone for a change, Irina is on her bed staring at the ceiling. She looks over to the window and sees that the plant that she and Oliver picked up at the farmer's market, Planty, is still alive, but definitely thirsty. She sighs. Irina is now in the print center, using a large scanner to copy the oversized pages of her graphic novel project into a staple-bound comic book format. It's striking, rendered in black charcoal with painted red accents and hand-lettered text boxes. She staples on the cover, which we don't see yet. She slips this copy into a manila envelope. We follow Irina across campus carrying the envelope, composing herself. As she walks, her confidence grows. Irina arrives at Oliver's dorm. She approaches his door and thinks about knocking, then decides against it. She kneels down to slide the envelope under his door, but before she can, it opens. She looks up, and Alice is there, smiling, absent-mindedly adjusting her bra under her shirt. Alice stops in the doorway, nearly tripping over Irina. Oh!
Hey, Alice. Sorry to startle you.
Irina picks the envelope back up and stands. Alice blushes. Uh-huh. Hey, Irina. Alice notices another figure in the dorm room and without thinking says,
Hey, Lewis.
Our focus shifts as she realizes that the man putting his shirt back on isn't Lewis, but Oliver. Irina drops the envelope and backs away. Alice registers the look on Irina's face. Wow, Irina, I'm really sorry. Oliver rushes to the door. Irina! Irina turns around and runs down the hall. Oliver and Alice watch her go. Then their attention shifts to the manila envelope at their feet. Back in the dorm room, Oliver slides Irina's comic book out of the envelope. Now we see the cover. It's called Cat People, and it resembles the poster to the 1982 version. A pale woman, her face half in shadow, looks directly at the reader. Behind her is a tall, skeletal tree with a panther standing on one of its branches. They read through it together, and we see a strange and bloody folktale unfold in red paint and black charcoal.
Animated backstory.
Absolutely,
Let's
yes.
go.
I think Emily Carroll should do this, by the way.
Okay.
In the 16th century, in early colonial Pennsylvania, a woman was accused of bewitching two brothers, both reverends, to fall in love with her. She took them each to bed behind the other's back, and when the brothers found out, they fought and killed each other. When their father, also a holy man, found out what had happened, he blamed the woman for his son's deaths. To him, the root of this tragedy was a woman's pursuit of her own sexual pleasure, itself a temptation of Satan. The father turned to dark magic to exact what he saw as justice. He placed a curse, not just on the one woman, but on all the women of his parish and their female descendants. If ever they should get overwhelmed by pleasure or desire, they would transform into a mindless, bloodthirsty panther and kill those nearest to them, even their own families. After enough blood was spilled, they'd return to human form so they'd be forced to live with the guilt and shame of what they'd done. There's no way of knowing if this story is true, but whatever really happened all those centuries ago, the curse is real. Cut to Irina, storming across campus in tears. She makes a call on her phone.
You were right. You were right about everything. I can't go on like this. I don't know what to do.
On the other end of the phone, Rebecca Judd sits on her couch, smoking a cigarette. Yes, you do. On campus, Irina stops walking, grits her teeth, and her eyes briefly flash a cat-like yellow. End of Act 2.
Okay. I feel like there's the big thing with Oliver reading his thing, which seems to be, and then we get this critique of Oliver.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that anything has happened to make me actually want to critique Oliver. I feel like he's a pretty good dude.
Okay.
Especially like as college guys go, like he's a fucking saint. Like as far,
well, I mean, that's kind of the issue, I think. He's much more cool, likable, and thoughtful and considerate than actual college Dylan.
I don't know that he's done anything unlikable yet.
No, that's the thing is, like, part of this critique is meta critique right now on this draft, which is that I feel as if maybe I am playing defense for Oliver and I am making him make the right choices and I am making him be the best guy.
Yeah.
At the expense of perhaps the most interesting narrative. So this was sort of a way to look at the way that Oliver sees himself and the way I'm portraying Oliver as maybe being nice to the point of smug.
Yes. I think, like I said, I think you've got something really interesting here in this idea of sex being difficult enough as it is being in college and then having this whole cat thing being in the middle of it. And it serves as a good symbol for college sexual relationships. I think then you've also got this sort of meta thing where you are criticizing your own draft of the film, which I don't actually think works in the context of the film because that's not in the film, right? Like now we've got, like as just a viewer, if it wasn't us talking about it here, if I was just watching this movie, I'd be like, wait, but Oliver does seem genuinely very good. And I think the thing that you are calling yourself on in the meta thing is actually just what you need to do in Act 2 or in Draft 2, right? You could take out the whole meta part where you're saying, hey, you made Oliver too good of a character, and just make him not as good of a character the next time. Because I think you do, in your meta commentary, have a point, which is that you might get some interesting stuff out of Oliver not being such a great dude. Because one of the things I was thinking is, okay, if this is our sort of indie drama, the beats of this are actually mapping pretty carefully onto like a standard romantic comedy film, right? Like, or romance film just in general, where like, okay, these guys fall in love. There's a miscommunication. It drives them apart.
Yeah.
He sleeps with someone else. It's a misunderstanding. Yeah. She catches them.
That's why the real end of Act 2 is there, because it's that point where where the romance is most in jeopardy.
Right.
But now we have to also add the horror twist, which escalates the stakes of that romance significantly.
But if we're seeing this as something like a Sundance indie drama, a Only Lovers Left Alive, the one by Luca, the cannibal one, Bones and All, I think it has to be weirder. Those movies, I haven't seen Bones and All, but that type of movie usually doesn't map so closely onto the beats of a studio film.
No, and Bones and All in particular, it just has this weird fucking pace that I don't really care for that movie very much. But I think kind of thing I'm going for.
Maybe your cat people here in a future draft would give you an opportunity to just have a weirder aesthetic. Like I not thinking of anything off the top of my head, but like, the thing about Only Lovers Left Alive, at least, is like it's so like visually vampire coded, even if the story isn't a traditional vampire story. Here you sort of have a traditional romance story that also has this monster thing sort of going on, and also has a sort of meta commentary about the draft you've written. And I don't know that they're all shaking hands.
Okay.
They're just not all kind of meeting in the middle. And I think it's a first draft problem. I think you've got a lot of ideas here that all kind of came out as you were figuring out what this movie is. It's the kind of thing where, like, we talk about Stephen King's On Writing, which you have said is like sort of a foundational text for you.
Yes.
He has talked about when it comes to themes in his writing, he doesn't think about that as he writes the draft. He will write the book, and then he sort of finds the themes that were there in what he's written, and then he gives it another pass that then reinforces those themes that came out in the first thing. And I think that's what this needs. You have a lot of ideas going on here, whether it's a meta critique of yourself as writer, whether it's, is this about college, sex, and communication? Is this about finding a sort of indie subversion of your normal monster things? And they're just not all quite gelling yet, unless they all kind of come together in the third act, which I'm open to.
I'm curious, but I think these are, I take these criticisms. I think these are very good notes. I certainly did not expect this thing to be bulletproof when I brought it in. I finished it like 2 hours before we sat down.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm proud of how much I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
But I definitely get that maybe not all of it certainly not gelling, and that maybe not all of it would survive another draft.
Yeah. And I don't think it would, but I think as a first draft, like you said, like you are trying a lot of things here, and there's a lot of interesting things going on. And I think it's going to be the kind of thing where maybe on another pass, you either excise one or more of the themes, or maybe find a way that they gel, but then it completely shifts your plot, where maybe it's like, well, what if Oliver makes a completely different decision at the top of Act 2 and we see where that takes us, you know?
We are about to have a pretty radical shift in the movie. So I think we should jump into it.
Let's do it.
Act 3. Back in Oliver's dorm, he and Alice sit with Irina's comic book. Oliver sits cross-legged on his bed. Okay, I'm bugging out. Yeah, it's pretty spooky. I like her allegory for patriarchal sexual oppression, like the way women are disproportionately held responsible for all negative outcomes of... I don't think it's an allegory. I don't think she made it up. What do you mean? It adds up a little too well. Like, why she ran off at that one party, why she basically shut herself off during sex. She was afraid that this was going to happen to her. She was trying to protect me. You don't think it's more likely that an artist extrapolated her deep-seated and institutionalized sexual repression into a scary story? I would have thought so a year ago. Now, I don't know. Lewis was telling me there's a werewolf on the loose. Maybe there isn't. Maybe it's this. maybe it's her. Cut to a campus club that ideally I would have established earlier. Lewis is dancing into some pounding club music with some hot classmates. We basically had the Bronze at my college. It was called Tracks. I played there a couple times. Lewis is dancing to some pounding club music with some hot classmates we haven't seen before. He steps away for a minute and heads to the bar, where he orders a soda because he's under 21 and can't order drinks here. Irina takes a seat next to him at the bar. It's a direct visual echo of Rebecca's barroom seduction from earlier.
Hi, Lewis. Whoa, Sister Mary Robert. What are you doing here? Trying some new things. I'm thinking it might be time to reinvent myself. It could just be the shock of walking in on Oliver and Alice, but I'm rethinking a lot of things. Hold up. Alice and Ollie? You didn't know?
Lewis grits his teeth. He obviously did not.
I guess we don't have the right to be upset. I mean, Ollie and I broke up weeks ago. It's silly to be jealous. I mean, you and Alice are totally cool with sharing. I just wish I could be as evolved as you two.
Lewis looks over at Irina, who is giving him the most intense bedroom eyes. Cut to Irina's dorm room, where she and Lewis are making out furiously. The lights are off, and there's very little light coming in from the window. Lewis excitedly undresses Irina as they paw at each other. Irina is tearing at Lewis's clothes, first in the expected way, but then she starts putting actual tears in his clothes. Lewis is too blown away by the fantasy of it to think too hard. Once she's got him down to his skivvies, Irina throws Lewis on the bed. She pounces on him. She leans over him, like a page from one of his stories, kissing at his neck and licking at his ear. He's ecstatic at first, but the expression on his face changes as the licking becomes wild and scratchy. He runs his hands up and down her legs and hips, and no matter what direction he moves them, the next spot seems to be hairier. Looking up, he then notices a long black tail flick around above him. Then he hears a thin, reedy voice in his ear.
Mine.
Irina bites down into Lewis's neck. He screams. She pulls her head up, her face now resembling a big cat's more than her own. She's got his jugular vein in her mouth. She spits it out and roars. Across campus, Alice makes a late-night visit to the school's swimming pool. As a member of the swim team, she has all-night access. She checks in with the security desk and goes to the locker room to get changed. As she's changing, she hears a strange, low rumble. She stops what she's doing and listens. It sounds like a low, deep purr. Thoroughly spooked, she hastily runs out of the locker room, still in her street clothes, into the pool area, which is empty and illuminated only by emergency lighting. She swims to the center of the pool and treads water there, trying to keep an eye on the perimeter of the pool. That low purr echoes through the room. Hello? Is anyone there? No one answers. Irina? She hears the purr again. It's too dark to see anything clearly, but she can almost make out two shiny yellow circles moving about a foot above the floor. Alice starts hyperventilating. Her hoarse breathing now overtakes the sound of purring. She tries to get it under control. Irina! Irina, I'm sorry!
It's all right, Alice.
It's Irina's voice. Alice screams sharply and then covers her mouth. We hear the ripple of someone moving through the water. Not from Alice.
I forgive you. After all, I know exactly how you feel. Those big, sad eyes, that lonely, romantic heart. You just want to kiss him and make it all better.
Alice feels the movement of the water and turns around in that direction. Irina is right there, closer than she would have guessed. She's human, naked, with blood smeared all over her mouth and chin. There's a trail of red behind her leading to the edge of the pool where she came from.
That's what I should have done in the first place. Now I'm going to make things right.
Irina wades closer to Alice, wearing a seductive smile, her eyes unnaturally shiny.
Do you want to help me get ready?
Smash cut to Alice in her sopping wet street clothes running through the locker room and into the main hall of the gym. She skids up to the security desk and screams for help. There's no one there. She bangs on the desk, but when she pulls her hand back, she finds that it's sticky with blood. The security guard lies dead under his desk, his neck and chest torn open and devoured. Alice sees this, screams again, and runs out the front door. As she does, Irina casually walks down the hall after her, still naked and supremely confident. Alice runs across the dark campus until she comes to a campus security alert station, one of those narrow 6-foot-tall pillars you'd find around at college campuses where you press a button and it immediately calls security. She slams on the blue button frantically, and the station lights up white and blue. She looks around, suddenly feeling exposed. A security officer answers the phone.
Campus security, what's your emergency?
She's coming after me! She's killed somebody, and she's coming after me!
Killed? Did you say she killed somebody?
Yes! The security guard at the gym is dead! For a moment, there's silence from the other end. Alice hears a rustling of leaves and cries out, Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here, miss. I'm calling the police. Just stay where you are and they'll be there in 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Are you shitting me? There's a murderer after me! Don't you have someone on campus already?
Miss, just calm down. The police have been called.
Alice looks around and notices that the main security office is maybe 50 yards away. There's a light on in one of the windows. Are you in the main security office right now? No answer.
Miss, the police are on their way.
Oh, fuck you! Alice hears a twig snap and then sprints for the security office. Nearby, Irina continues to walk casually across the mostly empty campus, naked and smeared with blood. She walks past the writer's house, where there is currently a party happening. Someone sees her and sticks their head out the window. It's Kenzie, who raises a fist and shouts,
Hell yeah, free the nipple!
Cut back to Alice, who arrives breathlessly at the security office and starts banging on the illuminated window. She sees no one inside. Then a hand reaches up inside the window and pulls the blinds down. Please, just let me in! Inside, a muffled voice.
Miss, the police are on their way.
Fuck you, you fucking useless outdoor mall cop! Alice looks around the relatively well-lit area. She no longer sees or hears anything alarming. Suddenly, she realizes, Ollie! She starts running again, now in the direction of Oliver's building. In his dorm room, Oliver is pacing back and forth, texting. Why isn't anyone answering? There's a knock on the door. He hurries over and opens it. On the other side, Irina stands, wrapped in a white bath towel, her hair still dripping wet. Her face is clean now.
Hi, Ollie. Can I come in?
From a reverse angle, we see that the back of Irina's towel is stained with the blood that was wiped off her face. Back to Alice, sprinting across campus. She runs past the construction site for the Joseph Dyer School of Paranormal Studies. There's a shovel standing up in the dirt. She grabs it like a javelin as she runs past. Back to Ollie's room. Irina slowly advances towards Oliver. He backs away nervously.
I was thinking, we should try again. Do it right. Candles, foreplay, the whole production. Don't you think?
Irina, please. It's gonna be okay. None of this is your fault.
Of course it isn't. I didn't do a goddamn thing to deserve this. I was born into this stupid, vicious world where I'm not supposed to want, let alone have. But I want, Ollie. I want all the time. I want so fucking bad.
Irina, let me help you.
Oh, I know you'd love to help. You'd love to be the good guy who saves the poor downtrodden woman, who shows her how she's stronger than her urges and the cruel world that punishes her for having them. You want to stand in solidarity with the magically oppressed damsel. But you couldn't do it, Ollie. You couldn't manage it for 3 measly months. Now there's only one way you can help me.
She takes another step towards him. He backs up, bumping into the bed. Oliver starts crying.
Come on, Oliver. Show a girl a good time.
She leans in for a kiss. Oliver, tears in his eyes, puts a hand on Irina's cheek and leans towards her. Their lips are about to meet, and then... thwack! Irina's eyes roll back, and she collapses to the floor. Behind her, Alice stands brandishing a shovel, its pointy end wet with Irina's blood. Oliver takes this in for a minute, then collapses in tears. Alice wraps her arms around him, and they cry together, and we pull away and fade out. The next day, Irina, alive but bloodied, is loaded into an armored van emblazoned with the Prodigium emblem. Alice and Oliver stand in front of the dorm, watching as the van pulls away. Do you think she'll be all right? I don't know. She seemed pretty far gone. Hopefully these Prodigium guys can cure her, or at least help her from hurting anyone. She doesn't deserve to be locked away. I think Lewis's parents would disagree. Right. Lewis. Oliver buries his face in his hands. This is all my fault. He looks up at Alice. You should have let her have me, and maybe this would have stopped. Alice grips Oliver's shoulders. Ollie, no! You might have set this into motion, but she was no more entitled to sex from you than you were from her. You get that, right? Yeah, I get it. Alice embraces him and holds him tight. As the van pulls away, Irina looks out its back window. She and Oliver's eyes meet. In each of their eyes is a mixture of grief, shame, and rage. Fade out. I know it's way too short of a third act. It's just, that's what I ended up with. Mid-credit scene! Because this is still a franchise film.
Of course.
Rebecca Judd sits at a bar.
I love the idea of one of these indie movies.
having
like
a
very
mid-credit
small
scene.
having a mid-credit
Gotta
scene.
give you a hook for another movie. This is what we're in the business of doing.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca Judd sits at a bar, as she did in her seduction scene earlier. Only this time, there's another figure who sits down next to her. We hear a familiar woman's voice. We don't see her face yet.
You're pretty clever.
Rebecca turns to face her. She doesn't recognize her. Am I? Most people can't tell just by looking at me.
You only hunt during the full moon, which makes the authorities jump to the most obvious conclusion, as they always do. Meanwhile, you're also being seen in public under that same moon, thus proving to anyone suspicious that you are not, in fact, a werewolf.
Rebecca gives her visitor a devious smile. Careful, honey. I'm very susceptible to flattery, and you wouldn't like me when I'm frisky.
Oh, I bet I would. Tell me, Rebecca Judd.
Only now do we see the woman's face. It's Carmilla, portrayed by Carrie-Anne Moss.
Ever been with a vampire?
Cut to black.
And now to me for our Dracula post-credits scene.
Where we last left our not hero. He and his blood brother, Ahul.
We're going to go look for Amenet.
Yes, we're going to go and try and find
recently-
Amenet. And as part of their quest now, Dracula's quest to kill Set and Nick Morton and Adelaide Van Helsing. So where has that quest taken them?
Post-credits scene. Rajat, capital city of the Kingdom of Morocco. The rain pours as hard as a monsoon. The camera slowly advances through the darkness to approach an upscale modern apartment building. But when we cut to the interior, it's anything but modern. A fire roars in an ornate fireplace, and the walls are decorated with ancient tapestries and shelves holding talismans and artifacts. The camera is mounted in the middle of a large round table in the center of the room and spins slowly to reveal the assemblage of guests. All the while, a woman's voice speaks, reciting an incantation in an unknown tongue. It appears to be a local family, dressed in traditional Moroccan garb, all holding hands, their faces lit by the flickering fire. The older members of the family surround a younger man, around 19 years old, who looks more nervous than anyone else. The camera continues to spin to reveal the woman sitting opposite the young man, a middle-aged woman played by Naomi Harris, whom viewers may recognize as Victoire from Dracula Lives.
Yay!
It has been her voice that we've heard reciting the incantation. She stops, and the room is quiet for a moment. Ah, yes. I can feel him. There's a powerful spirit presence here. The boy's mother smiles and squeezes her son's hand. Sharif! Are you there, Sharif? Your descendant is here and requires your counsel. A sudden wind blows through the room. Thunder rattles the windows so strongly that they shatter. The curtains blow inwards with the rain, and the royal family shrieks. Victoire opens her mouth, but the voice that comes out is not her own.
Performing parlor tricks for snot-nosed brats, Victoire. I see I'm not the only one who has taken a steep fall from grace.
The family looks around, bewildered. The father asks,
Was that him? The Sharif?
Victoire opens her eyes and returns to herself, flustered. You must all go. Now, please.
Go! We paid for your services, witch!
Victoire stands and shouts at him with fire in her eyes. Leave! The family stands as well. How dare you speak to the Sultan that way? You forget yourself, Victoire. Victoire has had enough. With a wave of her hand, the door swings open and a mighty wind begins to suck the family towards the opening. They try to fight against it, but it's no use, and the door slams shut the second they've passed through it. Victoire gathers herself and sits back down in the dark room. Even in death, you're a pain in my ass, Vladimir. This better be worth the money you've just cost me. Cut to hell. We are in the Sa Netjer, or mummy preparation room, of Pharaoh Meneptah. The pharaoh stands frozen over an empty sarcophagus. Inside the sarcophagus is a pile of bandages in the shape of a body, as if the person inside vanished after being wrapped. At the head and foot of the sarcophagus stand two Egyptian priests, also frozen, looking like they were holding down the shoulders and feet of the missing person. The pharaoh is pouring out a jar of what looks to be liquid mercury, which is similarly suspended in time, mid-pour. Next to this tableau stands Dracula, played by Mads Mikkelsen. On his knees in front of him is his brother, Ahul. The back of Ahul's skull has been cracked and torn out, leaving a crater. Dracula holds a metal scoop in one hand, used for organ removal. His other hand is inside Ahul's skull, soaked in blood up to his wrist, gripping and working the gray matter inside. Ahul's face is lifeless, his jaw and eyes wide open. Light shines out of them, casting an image on the wall of the chamber, a view of Victoire's apartment from her own POV.
What do you know of Amenet, Victoire?
Intercut between Victoire and her apartment and Dracula in Amenet's hell. No, dear, you first. How is it that you're talking to me instead of enduring eternal torment?
I made another deal with the demon Pazuzu. He gave me the first breath of freedom. Now it's up to me to claw my way to fresh air. In exchange, I owe him the souls of Nick Morton, Adelaide Van Helsing, and Set himself.
Victoire laughs. Set? It seems those fangs have finally bitten off more than even you can chew.
I was hoping Princess Amenet may be of use in my quest, but her hell appears to be empty. What have you heard?
Oh, Vlad. I'm sorry to say your princess is in another castle.
Speak plainly, woman.
Let's just say that Amenet seems to be extremely popular with your family tree right now. Dracula curls his lip and squeezes his fist harder inside Ahul's skull. A soft groan escapes from Ahul's open mouth.
Carmilla. I'll have her head for this. It's been long overdue anyway.
Victoire stands and looks out her window, hearing something outside. Well, in that case, you may want to hurry back home, my dear. Victoire watches out the window as a car parks in front of the apartment building. Two people step out of the car into the pouring rain. One is a woman whose face is obscured by her hat. She's helped out of the car by a man whose hat appears to float a foot above the collar of his coat. He holds an umbrella in one invisible hand. I have a feeling the party's about to get started, and you're not going to want to be late. Cut to black.
Ooh, a double tease. We're going right into the Invisible Man's revenge. Very nice.
Yes.
That was fun. First of all, I love Victoire. I think did a good job with Victoire here. One of my favorite contributions to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm glad that she's back in action. I really love the image of Dracula just punching a hole in his brother's skull in order to turn him into some kind of light box.
Yep. Yeah, to
and
communicate.
And I like that he could do that, and like, it's hell. We don't necessarily have to lose a Ahul from him doing this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess technically, even when he was like alive as a vampire, you could do this as long as his head's still connected to his shoulders. He'll heal, right? It's just a great image. It's a great little paycheck for Joe Taslim to appear as like a lifeless head.
I don't know exactly how it works, whatever he's doing, but
no,
it looks
we don't
cool,
need to know. It
and-
looks
yeah.
cool. That's the fun thing about magic. You don't have to explain all that shit. Just let it be cool.
Yeah, so a little tease for The Invisible Man's Revenge coming to you in 1 month.
So there you go. If you've listened to these past 2 hours being like, man, when are we going to talk about like the fucking Dark Legion?
Hey, we got to Carmilla.
We got Carmilla. We
yeah.
got Dark Legion. It's all good.
So let's talk about the third act of Cat People.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Kill Your Darlings.
That's fine. Either way, it's good. My initial preambles, I would really like to have a chase scene where they're running away from the fucking panther.
Yep.
I did not currently in this draft find a place where that worked. I would have to have really extended this third act. Also, I'd really like to extend the third act.
Yes, I think the third act needs
That
more.
is very, very short.
Because even in the 1942 Cat People, the swimming pool scene isn't really...
No, it's a suspense builder. It's not where the climax happens.
Yeah.
But I reached this point in the story and I was like, well, here's a way I can do it differently, for one thing.
Sure.
And also, you know, as I'm working on a time crunch, like I've rewritten the first act like twice, and I've rewritten the second act like once, and I'm working on the third act. I'm like, I need to wrap this shit up.
Yes.
So I was also kind of suffered from the fact that I did not get to expand it the way the other stuff.
Which is one of the... I mean, I know we talk about the third act stuff a lot, and I don't want to dwell on it too much.
No, but like
I don't
this
want to
is
go too long.
But this is definitely one of those.
This is one of those, and I think it is natural because of your way of writing. Your act ones are very fleshed out because you have more time when you're writing the act ones, and it helps you figure out where you're going. But as a result, you get to your act 3 and you're like, oh, I just need to end this.
Yeah.
And
which is a criticism we often have of older horror movies that just stop.
You're going to consistently run into this issue where your third acts end too abruptly because you're running out of time, you're running out of space, you're running out of stamina. And I think, not to say that my way is better or anything, but it's the other reference point I have, which is usually with my third acts, I know what I can build to them. Like we talked about with Carol's death. I almost was worried about a spoiler, but if you're listening to this, you've probably listened to Love
heard
Never
that
Dies.
one, yeah.
With Carol's death, I knew that was coming, and I also knew the Carmilla reveal was coming. I knew the Amenet thing was coming, and so I could build everything to this moment. And that way, your act 3 feels like that natural resolution of everything. And I think you end up in these places where your endings have trouble. And this is also a Stephen King problem, right? On writing is your Bible, but that's like the criticism of Stephen King is that he doesn't know how to end things because he doesn't write towards an ending.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ends up in a lot of positions where, like in The Stand, which is an incredible book, but then he has to Deus Ex Machina his way out of the ending.
Like literally, yeah.
Literally, because he doesn't have another way out. And I'm wondering what it might be like for you to write to a moment at an end, and if that would help at all.
Oh, it absolutely would. Listen, I'm not denying that at all. It's definitely a thing where it's a problem. It's a recurring problem, and my best scripts are the ones that don't have that problem, right? Like Phantom of the Phantom, even though I did not realize that I was going to drop the chandelier, the extremely obvious thing of dropping the chandelier onto Claudia at the end of that, I knew that we were going to end with the fucking theater exploding.
Sure.
Right? And that's like one of my strongest ones. And Dracula Lives, I kind of have the fun of this weird sort of episodic structure where I can work towards that point, but they can also be kind of back and forth.
And Hunchback, I sort of gave you third act.
You gave me my third act in Hunchback. Exactly. So that was really helpful.
Not to take credit, but I mean, I gave you some things.
You should take some. Listen, that movie, that script is much stronger because I had those beats to hit.
I just gave you an endpoint that you had to move towards.
Yeah, it was super helpful. Here, the only endpoint I knew for sure is I wanted my pool scene.
Yep.
And I wanted to have a final confrontation between Irina and Oliver.
So here's the bigger thing I want to talk about, which is I don't know that I understand why Irina makes such a heel turn.
That's the other thing, is that I do not feel as if, because she's very cool and reasonable, and then she just kind of loses it. That's not really working for me either. I would maybe like to have more scenes with her and Rebecca, where Rebecca kind of like...
We definitely need
way more Rebecca.
We need way more Rebecca.
I want the idea of where like, the thing is, like, I'm just trying to slow play certain stuff. Like, I leave the reveal of what the curse even is to pretty late. Like, it used to be much, much, much earlier in the script. But I'm like, well, no, because if I'm not doing a lot of monster stuff, then what I need to do is to like have this sort of intrigue and the mystery, because we're not like going to introduce an idea and then have a big spectacle that demonstrates that idea later. It has to be that we're only very gradually getting information and we don't know everything until shortly before we see the monster. Otherwise, there's too much time to build anticipation. You're like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
So I kept punting that down the road until eventually I came up with the idea of having her deliver it through that comic book, which I really like.
Yeah.
Because originally Rebecca just explained it because Irina didn't know the whole story. And during that scene where they're having tea or whatever, Rebecca just outlines the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, well, it's like barely halfway through it's not even halfway through the movie. Now we know this. What are we going to do with it between here and the climax?
Sure.
So I liked, and there was also difficulty of like, how long do I want to keep a bunch of the protagonists in the dark about something that the audience knows? So I wanted to draw that out in that way.
That's the other thing is like I don't know how well it works playing the cat people reveal as suspense. I guess it is a lesser known Universal property, but again, that's kind of beside the point. I think what really, without knowing why Irina makes her heel turn, you said that this was going to be a pitch that asked more questions than answered them, but it feels like there is a really big missing piece.
Yes,
I don't know that I can say what I think this movie was about without knowing why Irina turns. Because on the one hand, if Oliver had been a piece of shit, then we would have a very black and white thing,
right.
But at least it would make sense. It'd be like, oh, this is about the nice guy, right? This is the nice guy who says he can wait, but then he gets pushy, and then he oversteps, and this is a good for her sort of like Teeth, which I know you recently watched because you logged on.
I wanted to avoid any crossover with Teeth, and they're very different, right?
They're very different, but like, then that would be an explanation, honestly, like that's her getting revenge on the nice guy.
That
right?
was originally what I thought I was going to do. Oliver was going to be a very mean sort of critique of the sort of nice guy quotes character that I think I used to be, and I'm hopefully not anymore.
He is genuinely a nice guy.
The thing is that as I was writing, I thought it was more tragic and more interesting if all these characters were just kind of doing their best. And it was the situation that made it impossible. And then so what I was kind of getting to the point where like, this is where I also agree that I think I get a little bit confused here, because Irina just fucking loses it at the realization that she's never going to have what she wants. She can't have what she wants, and other people are going to have it, and she's going to have to watch. And because of the horror of it and the sort of extra layer of, okay, this was an evil that was done to her and other women by a man to punish them for wanting to have the basic sexuality that a person deserves to enjoy, then became, I think, a little muddled with something that I did not even really put together until like as a thing I was potentially thinking about until like the very last couple of scenes, and a thing that I would not have chosen to write about, I don't think, which is the phenomenon of like fucking incel guys in college campuses going crazy and like murdering women who don't want to sleep with them. It's not a thing I intended to be talking about, but the idea of flipping the script on it and getting to look at it through the lens of like patriarchally repressed femininity.
Sure.
It adds and makes weird layers, which is why I then have to have a character say to the camera, hey, it's still bad.
Yeah.
Right? But we relate to female desire so differently than we relate to male desire, because female desire is not in our culture considered to be dangerous, at least in the same way. It's only ever, or not considered to be dangerous to the other person. It's only ever considered to be something that a woman needs to keep in check. And, she's not allowed to say or wear the wrong thing because it'll provoke a guy, and then it'll be her fault. Right.
Yeah.
And that's so fucked up. And I wanted to both play with how horrible and terrible that is as a thing that a woman has to live with, that no matter what happens with sex, anything bad that happens, it becomes her fault. Right. And making that magically like, anything that she does is bad. Everything that she does is going to end poorly, not just for her, but for the other person, and it will be her fault. That's fucking awful. It's a terrible thing to have made magically literal for you, and that's a thing that I think that makes for good horror, is the idea that there's no escape from that.
I think there's an opportunity then here, because what we need to see that descent into madness a little bit, and that we need to see that that's the driving force, because then yes, that sets up a lot of interesting questions, a lot of interesting discussion. It could even be that maybe Oliver's a really nice guy and deals with the situation with Irina the exact same way, but then afterwards he blames her for it, right? And it's like, and then she's like, oh, what? I didn't do your first time having sex the way you wanted?
Yeah.
Like maybe like...
Yeah, that's something I feel like I planted better. And I think that some of it was just like, I ended up thinking that the character conflict was more interesting if it was all just like sort of like she just can't tell him this thing. But I think also I kind of wimped out on like reflecting on the awful sort of way that I think that most guys have been at some point in their sexual development, where they think, well, we've gotten to so-and-so, we've done blah, 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 blah. Why not blah, 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 right? And it's fucked up, but it's very much built into the culture of like male desire.
I think there's an opportunity here if we were to rework the not sex scene between Irina and Oliver, where we could also talk, I think part of this conversation is when you're in college and you're a dude in college, there is a pressure on the women to already know everything about sex, because the men, having watched porn or which I'm not going on an anti-porn crusade, I'm just saying like people,
the specifics of porn are often stupid and fucked up.
Well,
and they set really weird expectations.
And even just cultural expectations from movies, from Instagram, whatever, from Cosmo.
Yeah.
That like a woman's going to know, 10 perfect tricks for blowjob to drive him crazy.
She's done the homework, right? And so now I get to copy her notes.
Not even that, but like that he is owed a mind-blowing experience.
Yes.
And so she has this like, okay, I'm ready. And he comes in and like maybe even says something like, when he says no, she's like, what? And he's like, I thought you were going to be sexy. I thought you were going to seduce me. And she's like, oh, that's my job. Oh, and then they can both kind of be wrong, because on the one hand, yes, Oliver should not be having sex if he's not comfortable, and also should maybe not be having sex with someone who doesn't seem responsive to it in any sort of meaningful way. But she's also going through her own shit, and she sees his reaction as like, oh, he wants me to be some fucking porn star. He wants me to seduce him. And then he's ashamed and won't talk to her anymore. She takes that as, oh, he doesn't want anything to do with me because I'm not slutty enough. And this rift develops, and that drives her to Rebecca, where then she's like, all these guys are the same. It drives her down her femcel.
Right.
Path,
and I kind of also wanted Rebecca to be like, listen, they did this to us, so fuck them. Like, literally and figuratively, who cares what happens to them? There, I didn't have an opportunity in this draft to have Rebecca I don't know. I felt like I had to slow play the violence, and like the idea, and like, but for there to be sort of a this sort of like Sith Lord turn to the dark side thing, where she's just like, I told you couldn't have a relationship. I meant it. I didn't think you were ready to hear the rest of it, which is like, just fuck people and kill them. Who cares?
Which I
Who
think
cares?
also does bring up, and what might be, even though it's a little taboo and a little on the edgy side, I think if that's our conflict, that they didn't have sex and then she goes away and Rebecca's just like, doesn't matter what he wants, like, he sucks. I almost feel like the proper emotional gut punch here is that she does go to his dorm room to have sex with him, whether he wants it or not. And that's a big climax. Like, that feels like that begs a lot of questions where, like, if she's there to be like, hey, you don't get to say no,
right?
This time.
And because men are expected never to say no,
right?
And that
especially
plays with
in college,
especially in college.
And I
right?
know that's a pressure I felt in college, was that, oh, I have to be ready to go at all times because I'm the guy. I have to be hard all the time. I have to be like ready to say yes whenever, like that, because that's what dudes are supposed to do. And that Oliver could be feeling that pressure and she could take advantage of him for it. That would be an interesting way to go.
Maybe have to tweak, like we'd have to. It's tricky because we established that she turns into a cat when she's turned on. So it would have to be the kind of thing where she either is turning into a cat, which is fine. We could do that. If we don't have enough of that in the script right now.
Yeah.
Or it could be the kind of thing where she's still doing it in a sort of like she's not even hot for this right now. It is literally just we're doing this so that I can say that we've done it and we can shut the fuck up about it.
I think she can be turning because then the threat is both sexual and physical.
Yeah.
And that is scarier. What we end up building here is a very, I think, earned sexual fear that is an inversion of what this kind of situation normally is. While still, tough thing here is you don't want to turn like, oh, women are the villains kind of thing. But I think because of the misunderstanding of that inciting incident, her position is understandable. Her reason she's upset, obviously assault is not understandable, but the reason she's upset, and then plus the influence of Rebecca, the influence of the panther inside, whatever, turns her into a violent predator.
And I think that this is
in more ways than one.
Yeah, I think there's also, it's a way for us to dissect and sort of turn inside out the sort of, I guess, like fucking rape culture, right? Where we have sort of put Irina in a position where she is sexually predatory and has a degree of entitlement because she's like, well, I am the victim of a horrible fucking crime that was done to me before I was born.
Yeah.
And I deserve this.
The key here also is going to be not making Oliver a super good guy.
Yeah,
because we
has
don't want to
make some
turn
more
him
mistakes.
into a martyr for incels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have to make sure that he is also at fault here and does maybe deserve some sort of retribution, if not sexual assault and murder, but like that he is a flawed...
He needs to transgress, and he doesn't really.
Yeah, he's a 19, 20-year-old boy who fucks up.
Yeah, he is... I critiqued a thing about myself, about the idea of, that's something about you that you find unsightly, remove it, right? But I also completely did do that to the character, and then I decide to attribute it as a thing that he does. He needs some fucking bumps. He needs to be wrong. Everybody needs to be wrong more in here. Right now, everybody is pretty angelic and good and well-intentioned in behavior. Lewis is an asshole. He actually is never wrong the entire film.
And the thing is, if we're gonna have this cat stand in for like college kids are bad at talking about sex, that bad at talking about sex leads to misunderstandings and leads to people hurting each other. And I think the fact that, they can't talk openly about this, and yet they're still talking very well about it. And he's like, I'm not comfortable with this, so I'm going to step away.
It's all way too clean. It's all way too neat.
It's too clean. And I think the thing is, like, if he fucks up and be like, I thought you were going to be sexy. I thought you were
I think that's exactly the one.
I thought this was going to be hot. And she's like, what the fuck did you just say to me? That's them. They're communicating poorly about everything, both in what they're hiding and what they're actually saying to each other. It's not what they mean, but they're being mean to each other. And this eventually drives them to the point where she decides to embrace her panther nature and turn into a killer. And yeah, it's definitely, it would make this more of a tightrope walk.
Sure.
For sure. Because again, we don't want to paint a thing where like, oh, a woman wronged will kill a man, who's a nice guy. But I think that if you thread that needle, it's an interesting movie and it's asking a lot of cool questions.
But right now, it's not there. And certainly this is a draft written entirely so far by me, a cishet male. And I think that would definitely need to go through many rounds of workshop and likely sensitivity reading.
It's all there.
But it needs to be, in general, less sensitive.
The beats are there. I think it actually needs to be a little less careful and a little beat up a little bit.
It's a little bit, I think it's reserved. I think there's a little bit of cowardice on my part in this draft.
Not cowardice, it's the first draft. And also, it's a first draft that you are required to read on the record to at least 1,200 people plus future listeners.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you would hedge your bets a little bit. It's not like you're writing a first draft and showing it to your closest friend where they can be like, hey, Dylan, I think you maybe this isn't okay.
Right.
Like having the pressure of a first draft that you have to read on the record for anyone in the future to listen to is a lot of pressure.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I hope that people are kind.
Which maybe...
usually they are. Our audience is usually very kind and constructive in their criticism.
Maybe this is actually the best way this could have gone, where you write a sort of safe draft with all the beats, and then we talk about ways in which we could make it a little edgier, a little more transgressive, and work that out together and with the fans. So I'm sure we'll talk about this as well. So I think like the beats are there. I think everything's really good. We just have to subvert people's expectations a little more. And I think focus on what questions are we really asking of our audience.
Yeah. Honestly, this is the first one of these where I actually do kind of feel compelled to do another draft.
Do it.
I for one thing, I think it's one that I maybe could actually like shop.
Sure.
And also there's so much unfinished business here.
Yeah.
Most of these were just fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're the great exercise. I learned so much about my craft from doing it, workshopping with you, and talking to our listeners. This one feels personal.
Yeah.
And what I have to do is let it be more personal and like really take a much more honest, unsanitized look at my own self and history and weaknesses and things that I'm embarrassed or ashamed of about how I used to be handling any of these issues.
Yeah.
Right now, Oliver is a fucking dream world version of 19-year-old Dylan.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to be, and that's difficult to like, especially just like, oh, first draft. Okay, I'm now gonna read it to all these people who like me, right? I gotta be willing to take a more honest look at how shitty, in hindsight, I was even thinking that I was like the nicest, best guy. Like I wasn't a monster.
Sure.
But I think that like if you're not ashamed of who you were 5 years ago, you're not growing.
Yeah.
Right. And this was 15 years ago now. Holy shit.
So you should be triple ashamed.
Yes.
And if you want to find out what Dylan's ashamed of, I'm sure these future drafts will end up on our Discord, where you can also find all of my drafts of Looking Glass Lagoon. And hopefully we will see more drafts of Kill Your Darlings as well in that Discord. But before we talk about our Discord, let's talk about Picture Lock. Not a lot of Dark Universe ramifications here, except that our cat lady was taken into custody by Prodigium, which is now under... Wait.
You mentioned that it was controlled by the British government.
By the British government. And this is after the book was published, so this is contemporary with our other...
I'm going to sort of waive that because Prodigium operated internationally before, that it is still sort of an international organization. Mm-hmm. No one ever blinks an eye at a U.S. government agency just operating with impunity across borders. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to say the British do that now with Prodigium.
Yeah. And other than that, we saw Carmilla getting drinks with Rebecca.
Uh-huh. And this is a thread that I left out there. Was like, we don't have to pick this one up.
Especially because I'm the one with the Carmilla plans. It's like, do I have room for Rebecca in my next couple movies?
I mean, honestly, this story could just end with them hooking up, and Rebecca's like, "Oh, cool! I can safely have sex with someone who can't die."
Yeah, maybe they'll date for a while.
Yeah,
good for them.
So it's almost a happy ending for our serial killer.
And Dracula-wise, Dracula now knows that Carmilla has taken Amonette's soul. He's still trapped in hell, and it looks like the Invisible Man has come to talk to Victoire with a mysterious woman at his side.
I can't wait to see what that conversation is. And I'm very excited for that next official pitch episode.
Find out next month in The Invisible Man's Revenge. But for now, let's call this picture lock.
It's alive! In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God.
Thank you all for listening to Cat People. This was a very fun pitch. Thank you, Dylan. I would love to announce our next guest right now, but we haven't quite locked them in yet.
Yeah,
so
we're recording this earlier than usual on the schedule to accommodate Dalton's upcoming exciting French vacation.
I am actually going to France for a week with my girlfriend and my parents. It's going to be very nice. In the meantime, please sign up for the Patreon at patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton. Hear the rest of the bonus ep that you just heard a clip from and which we are about to record. And join our Discord community. Get the soundtrack for Love Never Dies. Read our finished screenplays for Looking Glass Lagoon. And in the future, perhaps Kill Your Darlings. Get bonus material for future endeavors, Dylan's new YouTube series. And it's a lot of fun. Free trial for 1 week and then $5 a month after that. And until next time,
Stay afraid of the dark universe.